Okay, this is so exciting. Okay. Now let's just, can we turn this into an 8? That way I don't gotta erase. I think everything's alright. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we're going to be looking at some artwork by some of my very, very favorite artists. Maybe it's one of you who are watching me right now, because we have an incredible community of artists who've been painting along with me, in some cases, for about a year now. And some of you have just joined us. So it's super exciting to have all of these different people from all over the world, from all sorts of different walks of life, who have been creating these artworks based on the masters, the greatest artists who ever lived. And you can see people growing and developing by leaps and bounds week after week after week, and you can see people's self-confidence in their creative process and their art making growing. And as a teacher, someone who's dedicated themselves their entire lives to making art, I keep saying exciting, but it's exciting because it's so exciting to see people growing and developing and feeling more capable than ever of expressing themselves. So please join me here while we go on this wonderful ride. Okay, where should we start? I've got lots of stuff I want to cover. So, let me see. I think, why don't we go right to our Facebook page here. So, if you click on one of the links down below, you'll see a private Facebook group, which I encourage anyone who's watching me right now to join, because this is how I found all the artworks that we're going to be looking at today. Everyone who's a part of this group has taken the time to paint the paintings we're going to look at and has uploaded them to this group. So this is really just for people who have been painting along with me. But there are artworks that people who belong to this group have created outside of the class. So personal artworks that people have made based on photographs and experiences that are important to them, friends and animals, family members, buildings, places people have visited, etc. Still life paintings, flowers and bowls and fruits and all sorts of different kinds of things, as well as people recreating other paintings by other masters, and some of which, and we're going to look at all of that today, because I think it's also, besides looking at the artwork that we've all done together, I think ultimately all of us want to be able to express our own ideas and thoughts and feelings better, or at all, right? And part of my philosophy of teaching these classes and recreating paintings by Van Gogh and Whistler and Alma Thomas, etc., is so that you can start finding your own voice, really. And it's always there, but it's, you know, right now we're trying to teach our daughter to speak, and she's babbling and mumbling and saying kind of all this. I'm sure to her it makes a bunch of sense, but we don't quite understand, but we can kind of get a little bit of what she wants. But ultimately the goal is for her to be able to communicate back and forth with us, and then that's going to be really super rewarding for I think for everybody, because I know she gets frustrated when we don't understand. So here's, like, this is all stuff that people uploaded over the past 24 hours. I think since over the past month, there's been 133 new posts and paintings posted to the Facebook group, which is super exciting. I've spent the whole day cataloging and organizing them. So let's dive right in here. I'm going to, while this is loading, let's okay, so I'm going to put this, make this nice and big, and okay, so why don't we start off with Salvador Dali. And we did a whole each one of these we're going to look at first are going to be the episodes that we dedicated to the artists and the artwork that we recreated from them. And I thought maybe we would begin just by looking at the original artist's artwork, just so we have a refresher at how good your versions of these paintings are. Because it is really remarkable. And actually the Salvador Dali ones that we're about to see here are really some of the strongest ones that I've seen thus far. And yes, of course, that helps that many of you have been painting with me for months and months and months. So it's not surprising that they're going to be better than maybe some of the earliest ones that we did. But you know, there's also a bunch of people who are fairly new to the course, and this painting, I think, I'm just really surprised that so many people did it so well. I'm not going to take any credit for it, because in some instances we'll see people did things better than me. So let's kind of leap right forward here. This is Dolores. This is the first version, or first step, I think, of her version of the painting here. So we see kind of it in progress, I think, before the black comes into play here. And then here's her finished version, which is amazing. Like, this is so awesome. All the details. In fact, you got way more little ants on here. And one of the things that, in my haste to finish the painting as quickly as possible, I just completely, I don't know if I forgot, but I realized, I think, towards the end, that I just wasn't going to have time to complete this little bit of, like, I guess it appears in this painting there's like a cast shadow from outside the frame that is coming, you know, from the right side here and casting a shadow onto this. But this area here, there was also a little bit of brightness. So if we go back to the original, in mine I just made this darker color go all the way up to the beach. But many of you were way more perceptive than I was, or spent more time on it than I did. And this is a great example. And I think, when, again, the original is quite small. So when we reduce your paintings down a little bit, they become really, really convincing, right? It is really remarkable. So this is fantastic. What a great way for us to start here, Dolores. Thank you very much. What can I say? Even here, you actually got a little bit of these rocks that I sort of just conveniently forgot because I was just, again, trying to get the painting done as quickly as possible, but I love that you got that little bit of a detail. And just while I'm thinking about it, one of the great things about learning to paint or draw is that I think we become more attuned to seeing details in other paintings and other artworks, but also just in life in general, because when you're looking so intensely at an artwork to find the colors and shapes and lines and all that stuff, I think it's hard not to take that same approach in your regular life. So I can only say, just from my anecdotal experience, when I'm walking around with friends and I'll be like, oh wow, look at this, or look at those clouds. Be like, oh wow, this he's always noticing things, right? But I think it's just because that's what I've been doing in my studio for so long, is noticing things, right? And it's the same way with musicians who have an ear for music, and they can hear different chords and sound effects and stuff, and so it's not super surprising, but it's really exciting to see people noticing those things. Here's Gail's version of the painting. Very cool. Wow, I love the way that you did the ants down here. Ah, neat. And wow, one of the things that I noticed in my own painting is I don't know if I drew it funny or the original is this way or what, but I had my own horizon was a little bit off, and in subsequent episodes you've seen me with my ruler trying to measure that out and get it straight. So it looks like you've done a pretty good job on that, keeping this horizon a little bit straight. I think it does kind of go up and down a little bit, but you also have to remember, this is a surrealist painter. Salvador Dali was all about using the techniques of the previous generation and generations of masters to convey images that were impossible and could not exist. So he would probably find it quite funny, at the very least, if not a really interesting avenue to explore, a crooked horizon, right? Where let's say the water was on a diagonal and yet the ocean didn't just rush out all the way down, right? I think he would find those kind of things particularly surreal, right? In that it's something that is bizarre and weird and impossible and just could not happen outside of the world of the painting. So all this is fantastic. I love the blending. Again, you nailed this this little extra bit of light in the background here, Gail, that I did not do. So kudos to you. Good job. All of these numbers and everything, that's really tricky to do. So I'm really excited that you were able to get in there and do some of that. Fantastic. Let's just progress down here. I think we've got about 15 paintings of the Salvador Dali to look at. Here's Hyvees. Wow, good job, Heidi. Wow, and you even got all the little dots in behind here. And again, even more ants. You guys did a great job with these ants, which is not easy because the ants are small anyway, but they also have all those little tiny legs, and each one of those is a tiny little brush stroke. And oh wow, and look at the way that you did the eyelashes. Like, even with the way that you did the eyelashes, they're dark, and then as they come over into this dark area, you've kind of lightened them, so we see the nice little trick there, so we can see how long they are. Because some of us, maybe including myself, it would have just gone dark, 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 dark into dark, and they might not be visible at all, really. But you've left that in there. That's fantastic. Great. I love these little highlights on the watch. Beautiful job. You know, this one was tricky in terms of all of the blending, like the blending in the sky, the blending on the ground. I'm trying to remember how we did that, if we did it with slow dry medium or glazing fluid. But blending with acrylics is a tricky thing to do. It's probably the most difficult thing that I can think of off the top of my head to accomplish with acrylic paint. It's much, much easier to do with oil paint. And, you know, pretty much all, I would say virtually 95% of the artworks that we've done in all of the combined painting classes, the intro to painting, the master study, and the paint the news courses, all three of those, almost everything has been done with oil paint, and we're recreating them with acrylic paint. And there's just some things that oil paint can do better or easier than acrylic does, and of course there's things that acrylic can do easier than oil paint, one of which obviously is because acrylics dry in 1/100th of the time that oils do. We can do lots of things much faster, and in that way I think a lot of people think acrylic is superior to oil. I know some people have asked me to do a whole oil painting class, which would be fun, which would definitely be fun. The thing is there's just far fewer people paint in oil paint these days, just because it's often seen as a smelly material or a toxic material, even though there's many ways to paint in oils that is basically non-toxic. And but anyway, that's a whole other conversation. Great job, Heidi. It's fantastic. Look at that. Yeah, and this little halo of white on the side. Perfect. Again, better than me, I think. Let's go along here. This is Irene's version of the painting. Wow, very cool. I love the way it kind of blends out here. And yours down here is a little bit brighter than I think some other people have done, which is totally fine. One thing I would think about is, you know, I think part of this painting is a little bit of the darkness, and I think you could keep this painting exactly without adding really anything new, but if you were interested in getting a little bit darker, doing a little bit of a dark glaze in some of these shadows might really just help amp up the contrast a little bit. And contrast is one of the great tools that we have as painters, drawers, as artists, really even sculptors. Having contrasts between light and dark shadows really helps define, give a shape volume and make it look three-dimensional. So if you were interested in really, you know, taking this painting to the next level, what I would do is get a little bit of glazing fluid and mix like a couple grains of black paint, like really very little of it, and just do a little bit of painting in this area to darken it down. And you can kind of put very, very little of it into this area to preserve this background, which I think is great, and a little bit in these shadows. And I think that is going to give it just a little bit more volume, because that black too will help push this area in the foreground closer to us. But I mean, I'm nitpicking here. Obviously, you've done a fantastic job, but I think, including myself, every time I finish a painting, you know, I look at it and all I can see is the problems with it, which every artist experiences, right? There's lots of legendary stories of great artists destroying their artwork that has been lauded by critics and collectors, and yet artists were just fixated on a problem and destroyed it. So we're always our own worst critics. So but you know, I'm very, very happy with the way that this has turned out. Great job. Very cool. Well done. Well, let me just, this is Josh. First of all, Josh did this one, and here he's included a picture of this tiny little canvas next to the computer. I can't remember how big that is. It's like 1 by 2 inches or something, very, very small, like about 2 postage stamps side by side there. So here's a close-up of it, and I think you painted this in oil. I think you've been doing a lot of paintings in oil recently, Josh, or mostly in oil. So to paint something that small is, and again, you know, we're looking at it on the screen like this. Now it looks huge, right? But when we look at it at a more reasonable distance, as somebody might actually look at it, it all makes sense, right? Great. I mean, the fact that you painted something that small is really admirable. Fantastic. And then this was another totally different version that Josh did based on another Salvador Dali painting, so that's why I included it here. And this one is the Pearl, which is based on, I think, a Velázquez painting. So Dali often quoted other artists while he was producing his artwork, almost sort of like a hip-hop rap musician who, you know, might sample another musician's music in the background. Salvador Dali did that often in his own artwork, quoting different artworks by different masters, and would have elements of those paintings in his own paintings, which, as I think about it, he would have been one of the first ones to do. I mean, there's a long history of artists making copies and reproductions and recreations like we have been doing, right? You've probably seen artists sitting in a museum with an easel making a painting in front of the original. There's a long history of that. And you can do that, by the way. You can approach a museum or art gallery and ask them about coming in and making a painting. Often there's some paperwork you need to get. You can't just walk in the door with your easel and set up, because there's security issues. They want to make sure that you're not a loony who's going to throw your paints all over another painter's artwork. But you can get permission to be there. It's way more common to see that in Europe. If you pretty much every time you go to the Louvre or the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, there's usually 2 or 3 people painting away. Oops, sorry, let's take a look at there's another one Josh did, a kind of Andy Warhol version of Salvador Dali here, this famous mustache. That's really cool. I love that you're uploading like a painting every day, Josh. That is very inspiring to all of us. Great work. That's really cool. Let's motor on here to May's version. Very cool, May. Look at that. So I like a lot of grays in this painting, which, you know, Dali would have used a lot of. You got all the shadows right. Beautiful. Well done. And what's kind of cool, I think I've seen that in your artwork, one of the things I notice is kind of a use of texture in your artwork. So I often see the brushstrokes coming through in your paintings, which I think is beautiful. There's different thoughts on that. There's, you know, Leonardo da Vinci, for instance. We cannot see any of his brushstrokes in any of his paintings. The thought at the time was you wanted to do thin glazes, when usually when you're glazing, everything is like almost transparent, and you don't really see the hand of the artist there at all. You just see, so it's the illusion of reality, right? And as we go in history towards people like the Impressionist painters, Manet, Monet, Renoir, Mary Cassatt, and Berthe Morisot, etc., we see a lot more brushstrokes appearing in the paintings as artists became more and more became fearless about leaving marks, these visible traces of the artist on the canvas. So that would be one of the things I would be thinking about with your painting is because there's 2 ways you can go about it. You could say, okay, I want to learn how to get rid of the brushstrokes, or I really want to embrace the brushstrokes in my paintings. And neither of which I have no judgment either way. I would say is like, okay, if we want to make the brushstrokes visible, then we really want to think of like, how can we use the textures of the brushstrokes in our paintings in the most effective way possible. And you know, some example, like an artist like Gustave Courbet, who is really probably the most famous artist to paint with a palette knife. Really, you can really see the texture of his paintings, and he really uses the texture almost like lines. So he uses, like, if we see the paint kind of build up, it's like the shadow will create a line on the surface of the painting. I think it's a really interesting thing. Maybe I'll put that in the back of my mind as I think about other artists, so that we can really look at artists who really use texture very effectively. Great job. Wow, look at this. Here's Peter's version of the painting. Like, you can see, very, very different, right? Like, so here's Peter's version, which is almost devoid of brushstrokes or visible marks in that same sort of way. So obviously, you know, there's lots of different ways to paint this exact painting. It's super interesting. One thing I would say about Peter's here is I would encourage you, Peter, to add a little bit more contrast, a little bit more black in this painting, because we have a lot of these midtones, and midtones are paint that has gray in it. You know, when we add gray to a painting, we're adding tone, right? We're changing the tone of the painting. And you can have a very, very lightly toned painting or dark tones of painting. So right now there's a lot of gray in these middle tones. What would be kind of nice is if some of these areas got just a little bit darker. I think that would really help create more depth in the painting. I mean, obviously, again, when I'm talking about anybody's artwork, I'm already, the fact that you guys have done any of this is just blows my mind. So I'm just thinking, like, how could I help somebody get even just that much better than you already are? So these are fantastic. This is really, really strong. Your background too, fantastic. And I think actually this blending of the sky, that is really, really well done. That was pretty hard to do. So that's really good. Really well done. There's a lot of, this painting is deceptively difficult, and the fact that so many of you pulled it off so successfully is really exciting. Wow, look at this, Shelly. That is cool. Wow, look at this background, gorgeous. Right, very different, you know, approaches, like even just these last three, right? So we've got, you know, a lot more gray in both of these. So we've got this kind of a little bit of a cold bluish gray in here, and then we've got a warmer blue gray in here, and then with Shelly we've got lots more browns in the painting. And you know, I'm not even going to go back to what the original looked like. I don't think it's even really relevant or important, but it's just really interesting to see what colors people are mixing to get the effects that they ultimately want. And that's really, I think, where we want to be. We don't really want to be like slavishly reproducing and copying the original. It's really helpful. I mean, obviously we're doing it for a reason, but as I always say, after a certain point in the process, is just to sort of like, you know, let go with love the original, and let your own painting take on its own life, of which you've done a fantastic job here. These are beautiful, guys. Oh my goodness, that's gorgeous. I love all these shadows in here. Really great. So the really nice contrasts here. So we've got kind of quite dark down here in the foreground and underneath here, and then you lighten it up significantly as we go back towards this lighter area here. Very cool. And Oh, and then I see Sahil just joined us in the chat here and asked me a really great question in a message earlier today, which I'll remember to get to right after this. So nice to see you here. Sue, look at this. I'm just gonna, let's zoom in on this, Sue. Oh, a little too close. Wow, that is cool. Great job. So we've got this very this brown here, and then this lighter, like that reflected light in the background, which I think is fantastic. The one thing I would say is this area now feels like it's literally on top of this area, which kind of makes it also feel like it's coming towards us. So what I would suggest is if we had a darker color, like a darker blue or darker brown, and we did a glaze, just like you did here, over top of this area, I think that would be really, really helpful. I mean, everything else is working really, really well here, Sue, but I just think you could get even better, because you're obviously doing a fantastic job, so really cool. Wow, I love the colors you use in here. These purples work really, really well. Huh. Great job. You know, another thing I'm looking at is there's a little bit of space in between some of your colors and some of these objects, so the paint kind of doesn't quite go right up to the line. And I see these kind of curves in a few places. What I would encourage you to do, especially in your first few layers, is don't worry about going over top of another color a little bit, because you can always go back over. Like, so for instance, if I was painting this blue, I would take this blue and go right up to the edge, and even maybe go over top of this tree branch a little bit. And then afterwards, I can take another color, either remixing this color and painting it over top, or a slightly different color. And that would kind of give a nice, it would make those two shapes kind of nestle in together, like really tight, like a you know, good carpenter, right? The two pieces of wood, you know, if you have those joints where a piece of wood kind of snap together really, really well. I think that would be, something that you could explore going forward. Same sort of thing right here, is not having a fear of taking this darker color over top of the watch and letting it go, and then do another, like, say, take a little bit of white and just go back over, and it'll make a really nice clean line. Having said that, there are lots of artists, Matisse probably being the most famous, who really embraced leaving space between brushstrokes. So that would be a question to you, is like, well, you know, if you look at Matisse and the way that he painted versus like Dali, two artists who lived roughly the same, I think Matisse was probably 20 years older, but they were alive for many years at the same time together, who painted very differently, right? Dali painted in a very classical approach, and Matisse painted in a very avant-garde, modernist kind of a way, right? And so just as you're painting, thinking like, huh, what am I attracted to? Or when you're looking at other artists' work, what kinds of work is it that I ultimately wanted to be making? And then you can course correct based on that kind of thing. Very cool. Here's Susan's. Wow, look at that. So this, what's so interesting is, like, look how clean and precise this painting is. Right? That is so interesting. Wow. So this is very different than almost everyone else's artwork here, in the sense that everything is, there's a real precision. There's a lot, like, talk about contrast here. We have a great deal, like, look at the contrast between these colors, right? Or this shape, this kind of soft skin, I think as you would call it, and then the dark background. Like, so extreme contrast. To the point where, I mean, I think this is gorgeous. I would say to really nail Dali, we would want actually a little bit more of those mid-tones, so kind of actually softening some of those. So so we've seen some artists here so far who have kind of less contrast in their work, and I was suggesting bumping up the contrast a little bit more, so expanding the tonal values, right, so that we have some really, really darks and some really, really brights. And then here in Susan's painting, we're actually kind of living on the edges, right, we have really, really bright brights and we have really, really dark darks, and I would actually say it'd be nice to maybe have just a few more mid values in here. But again, right, it's a great painting. I'm just being picky, but looks fantastic. Really great job. I actually really like the painting with this really high contrast. It makes it look very modern, if I was to say, like, it looks, what does it remind me of? I can't think of what it reminds me of, but it just seems like something that seems very contemporary, very contemporary take on a Dali painting. Great work. Okay, and here's Vanya's version here. Really great. Wow. Yeah, like I mean, and similar here, we both are very high contrast paintings. Maybe a little bit more mid values in Vanya's version here. But you know, I guess what it kind of makes me think of is like it feels a lot like illustration. Like it I teach illustration at Emily Carr University, so I have nothing against illustration, but it reminds me a lot more of like children's book illustration. I think even both of these, because children's illustrations tend to have quite extreme contrasts, because it's something that appeals to kids. Like, you know, again, I have a almost 2-year-old daughter right upstairs right now, just got up from her nap. You know, when she was really young, the books that we got her were these, what do we call them? Like, they're like basically black and white books, like silhouettes, right? So a silhouette of a spoon, a silhouette of a dog, and she would, like, you know, you could show her any other book and she'd have zero interest. You show her that and it's like, oh, because it's so like black and white, right? No grays, no colors, black and white, and it's really easy for kids to understand, versus when there's a lot more complexity in images, that they just sort of, it's, especially when they're really young, it just goes over their heads. So that's why children's book illustration, not always, but often has like big contrasts of color here and value. And when I say value means contrast between light and dark, right? We did a whole episode in our painting class on value, on adding white, black, and gray to color. And I think let's kind of finish off here. Deborah has, this is the original version of Dali's St. John of the Cross, and this is a painting that she really liked. I mean, obviously it's a great painting, and I think she may have done this for the Easter painting we did when we did the Fra Angelico. But so this is obviously a gorgeous painting Dali did. You know, Dali was seen as a kind of super eccentric, silly weirdo, but he also was very, you know, he grew up in a very traditional, I think, was it Catholic family? I think it was a Catholic family, and obviously was very familiar with the iconography and imagery of, you know, biblical paintings, and was commissioned by a number of different churches to make paintings for them, of which this is probably the most famous. So this is the original, and then this is her version of it. And I think she talked about, I'm not even going to mention, because I can't even remember all of, everyone usually when they're posting images writes a little thing on the Facebook, and then I'm just like dragging them off into folders, and I often don't have a chance to. I read them originally, but this posted maybe a month ago, so I can't remember all the details here. But I think it was talking about the perspective, and maybe I think Deborah's doing my drawing course potentially, if I recall, and was saying that would be helpful, you know, going forward, like really knowing how to do perspective for painting a painting with this. This is like extreme. We call this type of, like, we have this because I don't know if anyone watching necessarily has heard of perspective when we talk about drawing and painting, but when we have this cross that appears to be sort of going from far away and then going almost right over our heads as we're looking at this painting, and we have what we call like foreshortening here, where the arms, like this hand, is much larger than the feet, for instance, right? Like twice as big as the feet or the head, right? So in the same way, if I reach my hand towards you, my hand, if we were going to paint this painting, we'd have to paint my hand much bigger than this hand, right? There would be two, but we know that they're, you know, I didn't all of a sudden take some sort of nutritional supplement and my hand grew twice the size, right? We have to make it bigger for people to understand that it's, because if it's the same size, then we would think it's right next to this one. All right, so very cool. I mean, this is not an easy painting to paint, and you've done a fantastic job of doing it. Especially, I mean, obviously the foreshortening, everything going on up here, I think you did a great job. I think it was really nice, these shadows on the body. But even down here, like this, is really gorgeous. Your landscape that you painted, that's really nice. Huh. You know what's interesting too? I don't know what this kind of green is. That's, I don't know if there's a hidden image in this painting, but it's kind of, it's cool that you actually included a little bit of those lines and shapes in your version. Very good. Wow. Okay. So maybe there's lots of things in the chat here I'll get to. I did want to address here, Sahil asked me a question about taking the drawing, like, basically the question is, should I take the drawing class? Like, I'm taking the painting class. I just started the painting class, the one that we began in September. I just started that. And I noticed you also have a drawing class. Should I stop and do the drawing class, or should I continue doing the painting class and then do the drawing class? What order should I do them? Do I need to do the drawing class? Do you think that would be helpful for painting? Great questions. And it's there's no real easy answer to a question like that, except, let me see. I'm just going to bring, just because maybe not everybody knows that I've done all these different courses. I'm just going to bring them up here. Let me go to, okay. So I'm just going to, this is my Facebook channel. Or my YouTube channel, which obviously, if you're watching me right now, you probably know. But just I thought I would mention here, if you just click on like any video of mine, and you'll, where it says Markowsky, or you click on it, it should take you to this. It'll look maybe a little bit different. This is the back end on my side, but if you click on playlists, you'll see all these different kinds of things, and we see. These are my student courses. Here's my drawing course. Okay, so we've got a few different things here. So if you click on the master study, I think most people know that. How come it's not showing? Oh, here we are. Here's down. Here's the the list of all the episodes for the Master Study. All the different episodes there. Here we click down here. Here's all of the Paint the News episodes that we've done. And then here's it's so like these episodes. When did I do this? Is April 28th. So a year ago when I was teaching this drawing, you could see the studio. It's a little bit different. I had all of these. This is I still looks just about as messy, but I built all of this other structure here subsequently. But anyway, here's the drawing course if you're interested in taking the drawing course. And there, look at all these episodes. You want to learn how to. Here's the perspective episodes we were just talking about. But if you're interested in learning a little bit more about how to draw, because I think drawing is a really, really helpful skill when it comes to painting. You know, I think traditionally drawing has always been seen as a means to another end. That you learn drawing so that you can make better paintings. And it really hasn't been until like, you know, but even really up until about 50, 60 years ago, people wouldn't really take drawings very seriously as finished artworks. They're always seen as like, oh, that's a really good sketch for a painting. Oh, these are really good kind of plans, outlines for a painting. And so people would collect them and be like, oh, this is the sketch that Michelangelo used to make this painting. But very few artists actually just sat down and made drawings that could be exhibited on their own. There wasn't a painting based on it whatsoever. When I was in undergrad in art college, I studied drawing. That was my major, was a drawing major, and I took all drawing courses. I also took, obviously, painting classes as well, but my major was drawing. And I still really consider myself at the heart a drawer or illustrator more than a painter. So I personally think drawing is really, really essential to making good paintings. But there are plenty of artists who feel very, very differently about. I mean, this is an argument. This is an argument that if you do a deep dive on the internet, you'll get sucked down into the rabbit hole. But anyway, so I think my recommendation to Sahil was, if it's possible, you may find it interesting to do an episode or two of a drawing course while you're also doing the painting course. It does double how long everything would take, but I think at the end of the day, you will find it really, really helpful while you're doing, because even just think, like when we've been painting people's faces, you know, like, and some people really struggle with that. And I think part of that is because they don't really understand the structure of the face. And that's one thing I always have to remember when I'm teaching my painting classes, is to like, okay, well let's slow down here when we're doing the face, because I can easily lose people along the way, because you know, that's why these days I start now actually painting like the eyes and the nose, like just outlining them, and then paint over top of them, because I mean, usually when I'm painting on my own, I would just paint over the whole face. It might just be a big blob of white or brown or gray or whatever, and then I have enough understanding of the structure of the face that I can go in and redraw those parts. But I just do that intuitively, and then I see other people who are like, whoa, how did you do, like, where did you, like, oh, yeah, I guess I didn't think about how difficult that could be for somebody who has no experience in that area. So, yeah. Having said that, as you know, I've made outlines for all of the artworks that we've done, you know, here in the Dropbox, including in the original Intro to Painting course, even though I don't mention it at the time because we didn't start doing that until a little bit further down. But I've gone back and, I don't think there's one for that. But, you know, let's say for the color wheel, there's templates here for the color wheel that you could print out and trace onto a canvas. Like all of these here, you know, like Matisse. So you could download this and trace it onto a canvas just like that, right? Which would make it much easier. And the reason why I'm doing this is so that people can focus on the painting and not on the drawing. Because that often, if people don't get the drawing right when they're making the painting, then they just feel super discouraged. Even if the painting itself, you've mixed the colors really well, you've applied the paint in a gorgeous, masterful way. If you feel like the composition's a little awkward, then it doesn't matter how great the actual application of paint is. You're just like, well, it doesn't really look very, you know. So that's why I started doing all these tracings, is we could just kind of short circuit the drawing process and go right to the painting thing, because that's where I want people to learn from. I hope that answers your question, Sahil. Let me just, while I'm kind of going through some of these things. Oh, look at this new painting by Gails. Look, you guys are so active on here that I'm constantly missing. Everyone's excited. There's all these positive comments here. Irene says, okay, thank you for your input. I'll try that and post. We will look at, I think, a couple of people who've reworked some of the paintings based on the most recent feedback episode, and the paintings look really, really good. They were really, really good before, but I think they're like even better, if you can believe it. So I think it is, you know, helpful to I also think, like, if you were able to do it the first time, you can do it again the second time, and 95% of the time it's going to be better than it was the first time. There's always the little bit of beginner luck sometimes where you just nail it the first time, you try to do it the second time and it doesn't work as well. But almost invariably, the second time you make a painting, it's going to be better. That's why, you know, when you're first painting, like, just getting anything that looks reasonably in the ballpark is super satisfying, and you get very afraid of touching it. But the more and more you paint, the less likely you are to be super, like, attached to the painting, and you're more willing to kind of, you know, go back to a painting and paint on it a little bit more afterwards if you feel it needs a little bit more. Sahil says, hello everyone, looking at all these paintings is very inspiring for a beginner like myself. I just have one word. Wow. That's great. That's great. And remember, like, you know, almost everyone whose artwork you've seen here was at one time a beginner. Even Matisse or Picasso or Leonardo or Frida Kahlo, all of them were amateurs at one point, right? I think we always we forget that the great masters of painting and drawing and violin and music and dance and hockey and tennis at one point were all people that didn't know how to hold a tennis racket or a pencil or chisel into marble. All of them at some point were a complete amateur beginner, and through the practice of working on their technique and improving, achieved that status of master, right? And I've done a lot of research on that whole concept of genius, and there's a number of really great books that have come out over the past 5-10 years about it, all of which say that there's literally zero, nothing, nada. That idea of genius does not exist. There's no one who's ever in the history of the world been born a great artist. Never. It does not exist. It's a complete and utter myth. And I know somebody's gonna try to debate me about this, but it has never, ever happened. Every single great artist or artist that we see as being a great artist today was a a beginner, and just by practicing they got better. A lot, and just to kind of tie that up, those artists that were really successful really early, and the examples people often use is Mozart and Picasso, who are both like prodigies at like age 5 or whatever. In both of those instances, their parents, both of their fathers, were highly accomplished composers and painters in Picasso and Mozart's case, right? So it's not like they just appeared out of a vacuum. Both of them had parents that were some of the best composers and musicians of their time, and poured a lot of energy at an early time into helping them grow. Anyway, I'll just leave it at that. Deborah says, my feeling is that to do the drawing class when you can. It does help so much. Even though you do this after and during the painting class, you will benefit so much from it. And Irene says, I have to agree with Deborah. I have been doing the drawing class and it has helped so much with painting. Gails just joined us, and Zeal says, thanks for the feedback. I'll be doing both courses simultaneously. Draw during the day and painting at night. Wow. Make sure you also save a little bit of time in there for sleep and eating as well. But that's great that you're going to do all of them. Okay, so let's move on here. My goodness. See, I tend to, I'm sure everyone knows, yeah, you ramble a lot, Michael. You always blah, 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 blah. I just get excited about all this stuff. So the fact that there's people are willing to sit and listen to me for any period of time and indulge me. Okay, so let's so this is the quote-unquote original illustration that I did. This is a photoshopped version. I took this image of a book I found online on a website called Unsplash, and we've talked about this before. It's a website, they're not sponsoring me or anything, but you can find free images that you can use for any reason. So I found this image of a book and kind of actually stretched it out and changed the table, and then I photoshopped this painting by J.R.R. Tolkien into it. So this is what the original image looked like. And then you can see I created all this extra stuff above. And we're going to see, you know, there are some people that I painted my own version of the trees in a very different way than they look here, just out of time constraints. But a number of you hewed very much closer to the original than I did. And just two different types of painting, really. So let's take a look at Sue's. Wow, cool, Sue. Okay. Let me just see if oops, it's too close. I love that you left a little bit of space up here for the text. That is really smart. You know, there are, you know, obviously, you know, when we look at Tolkien's original watercolor here, he actually made a point of including like this border and putting the text in there. It's not something that is very common in like so-called like fine art museum paintings, but it doesn't mean that it's never happened or does not happen. There are, in fact, more. I would say it was very common for a long period of time, like up until the Renaissance period, and then it kind of, for many reasons, kind of died away for about 400 years, and then has reappeared. Probably pop art, like Andy Warhol, Roy Lichtenstein, were some of the first artists to really bring text back into artwork. And so we see a lot more text in artwork these days. Anyway, why do we even... I think this is great. I love the way that you're applying the paint. Like, it looks like it's very thin applications of paint. So I don't know if these are little thin glazes, but they look really nice. One great thing about when you're painting thin like that is you can really build these layers really nicely. And we can get like a lot of depth. Like I like what's happening here with these reflections. I don't even know if I did that in my painting. I can't even recall. That looks really nice. Very cool. And I think it looks like you approached the trees or the leaves a lot like I did. Cool. And I don't know. I don't even know if I put a person on my these barrels or not. Wow. Whoa. Cool. So this looks a lot like my painting, and I'm sitting here like, wow, it's great. It looks like mine. I just mean that you've done a pretty good job. And in fact, I actually think your version here with these branches looks really great. I think it's probably a little bit more bluish than it really is. Just the way maybe it was photographed. Let's just bring up the color picker here. I would bet if we play with the color temperature, I bet your painting, if I was to guess, is a little bit closer to that than this. But maybe. Just again, some of these, there's probably not that much blue in your painting. Really nice. Sue, or Susan, I can't remember if we were just talking about your Dali painting having that same level of kind of contrast and kind of illustration kind of look. Like these, it looks a lot like if you really like this type of painting that you're painting, you may want to really think about it using gouache as a art material. Either, you know, at some point, just because gouache, what's nice about gouache is it kind of exists in the area between watercolor and acrylic paint, because it's, you can use it in many ways like watercolor, but it's more opaque. It's thicker, and it gives really nice, strong, dense colors. So I've only painted with gouache a few times. I really don't know why I haven't done more of it, but that's sort of on my bucket list of things to do. One day I'm just going to go and spend a bunch of money on gouache and explore it on my own. But this, to me, feels like a very illustrative kind of a painting, which is a lot like how Tolkien did his. Really cool. Let's look at here. Wow, look at Richard. Wow, so Richard painted these trees above a lot more like Tolkien did, right? As opposed to the way that I was doing it. And I think it turned out really cool. Really neat. It's interesting how you've your version of the painting, more so than mine or any of the other ones you've seen. You've really kind of used it feels like that book is really opening into a different world, right? Like we kind of float down here, and then if you were to kind of pass these first set of trees, you no longer see the book at all. You're now fully into the world of Tolkien's, right? Like we see this hillsides kind of going right up here, which is really interesting way of, it's different than, let's say, the illustration that I did in my version. I kind of kept the book shape intact, but I also think the way that you've painted it is really, really cool. Huh. I like it a lot. You did a fantastic, masterful job of the leaves in the trees. Really, really cool. I'm really, really impressed by that. Okay, let's continue on here. Wow, here's May's version. Look at this, May. Again, I see all this texture, the real embrace of the brushstroke, which is really nice. Very cool. Yeah, there's like one thing I think about your work, May, is really playing with both texture and then opaque versus transparency in the painting. Like we have areas where we really see the layers of paint underneath, and then we we could see this texture underneath and the color underneath, and then other colors on top of it. So we're kind of creating these kind of webs of color. And there is potential, if you really, really wanted to go quite far with your painting, to really explore potentially paint if we were to take this to its like logical conclusion, one thing you could do is, let's say you could paint one painting and then you would paint another painting on top of it and still have that original painting coming through as texture or just as its color, and then more transparent painting. And it could be a similar painting or something radically different. Like an example, like there's many examples of artists painting over old paintings, and we might see, you know, a portrait, and then you know, ours might turn the portrait outside and paint over it and paint a landscape over top of it, and we can only see it when we x-ray it. But there could be something really interesting about painting, let's say, a portrait and then painting the landscape over top of it, but not hiding the original completely, so that it kind of, there's the ghost of it showing through. Anyway, there's some interesting potential here for really embracing this kind of thing that I see in your work. Another thing, what's interesting is the way that you painted this painting. You painted it as a landscape format rather than portrait format, so you turned it onto its side. So I'd be interested to know what your thinking was in doing that. It definitely makes it bigger. It probably makes the book bigger. Oops, where did we go? Here we are. And so obviously there's less focus on the leaves in the sky. Oh, cool. It's interesting as we go down here with like the you know, this texture of these rocks that were in the foreground. They kind of blend into the book a little bit, right? They start to becoming, which is, you know, great, because that's kind of what the whole idea is, right? The book and the rocks kind of blend together into one. Oh, and I like how you got all these little houses. I didn't even do that because I was there at time. Very cool. Okay, I'm sorry, I've got to move on. Got so many paintings I've got to look at here. Wow, look at this, Heidi. Ah, this is so interesting. You took a totally different approach on these leaves in the above here. Very interesting. So it looks like what you did, as opposed, because I think I was painting little bits of color, right? And then I kind of encircled them with the white. And then obviously the original, like let's say if we go back to Richard's, the way he did his was a lot more like the original one. And then you've taken a third different direction, is where you've kind of painted a whole bunch of little things and then just kind of gone in there and encircled things. It's almost like in between the two different techniques. And that's great. I love it when people, it doesn't, like, I don't, when I see people sort of taking their own direction in these like paintings, and people who, yeah, like doing exactly what you did here, it doesn't upset me. I don't in any way. In fact, I find it very inspiring, and it makes me really excited, because I think, that shows confidence. That shows somebody who's like, that's interesting that he's doing it that way. You know what? I'm gonna do something a little bit different. That's great, because that tells me that you're feeling that you have more confidence in your ability to express yourself and with the materials, and that you see something different than I do, and you're going to explore it in your own way. And that's exactly what I want everyone to be able to do the more and more that you paint with me, right? Because I don't expect people who, those of you that are watching me right now and uploading, I don't expect you guys to be here a year from now or 5 years from now painting with me a couple times a week. I mean, that would be great. I love having all of you guys around, but you know, it's you know, and I hope that I continue to challenge people, and maybe when you're super successful and you'll come back and say hello and encourage other people who are at the beginning of their journeys as well. But it makes me really excited to that people might eventually kind of graduate from from these classes and move on and be doing their own things entirely. Wow, look at these, are so great. Wow, look at that. Gail, rocking it out. Yeah, this is, I mean, again, look at, there's so much beautiful stuff going on in here. I don't really have any, like, what can I say about some of the, I guess maybe one thing I would say is, in the way that I kind of constructed this, is that this this bookmark could get a little bit darker as it goes through the darker shadow of the painting. That would be one little thing that I think, because right now it looks more like a slide, like it's, I guess you do have a little bit of a shadow under there, but I would expect if this is darker that this would also get a little bit darker. Maybe not this edge, but might just kind of sag down a little bit, unless it's a bookmark made of plastic or something that's really stiff. But very cool. I don't know what can I say about this great achievement. Cool. And wow, who's okay? So Gail, Eleanor. Look at that. So talk about like a very graphic, illustrative approach to this painting. Here's Eleanor's version, and Eleanor is somebody who's just joined us over the past month, I think, and has been super active in the Facebook group, posting. I think Eleanor's done the whole painting course in about 1 month, basically painting like 1 or 2 paintings every single day. And I mean, I have no idea what your level of ability was before you started painting with us, but you're certainly very strong right now. And so we see a very nice application of paint, like all of these. I don't know if it looks maybe like you painted them darker before and then went over them afterwards with slightly with brighter colors, so that we can get these really fine outlines. Maybe that's how you did it. But really beautiful attention to detail in your painting here. Great work. Wow, I really like the way you did the water and these waves. Again, so like very high contrast type of painting here. And that's really reminds me of children's illustration. Again, and I just have to keep saying, I don't mean to say that's better or worse. I think when people hear like, oh, he's comparing me to a children's illustrator, you know, he's saying that I'm not very good. I'm like, some of my favorite artists are children's book illustrators, and I look at a lot of children's illustration these days. Not only because I teach that in my day job, but because I have a daughter and I'm always looking at children's books all the time, and some of them are fantastic and some of them aren't so fantastic. And really, when you think about it, like the children's books are often the things that make the most impact on us. Maybe we don't even remember decades later, but you know, sometimes it's in the back of our heads somewhere, right? Really beautiful. I love the way you did the table. Shadows really nice. Yeah, all right, what am I going to say? It looks fantastic. Great job, Eleanor. Thanks for painting along with us and joining us, even though you've come to us a little bit late. You're welcome. You're in this community for sure. Dolores here. Look at this. Very cool. Wow. You know, it's interesting the way that you outlined all of this. It's a little bit different than it's kind of like a combination of the way that I did it and Tolkien did it. You've got these shapes are a little bit more varied than mine. I think mine were mostly just like little simple circles, but I think this works really well. Very interesting, super cool. A totally different interpretation. Beautiful, well done. Nice, like look at how you've got all these different greens, not outlined, or they're just using different mixes of greens, different tonal changes here with a little bit of grays and whites and blacks and blues maybe mixed in there. And so you're creating that space with just using different green. and that's great. That's really hard to do. It's especially for beginner artists, and I know you, Dolores, you've been painting with for a while, and but it's really exciting to see like that ability to create difference just with modifying your hues and values. Very cool. And then we have Deborah here. Deborah going wild here with a dragon and a spider and what is a Sasquatch here. I copy here. Look at okay, so we have Smog the Magnificent. That's the dragon. Schlob, that's the spider. It's been 20 years maybe since I read Lord of the Rings. I can't quite remember. And then a wood elf peeking behind the trees as a burglar rescues the dwarves. Wow. That is so funny. Just seeing in the chat, Eleanor says, I didn't do this. It's a beautiful painting, but not mine. And Heidi says, is it Charmaine's? Good question. I apologize. Whoever did this one, I'm sure it's on the Facebook group there somewhere. Anyways, often as I said, there's been 133 new paintings you guys have submitted. It took me all morning to catalog all of them, so it doesn't surprise me that I've made a few mistakes here and there, but someone I'm sure will find it and let us know. Anyway, so very cool. I love the creativity here of including other things. Obviously, Deborah very familiar with the Lord of the Rings books and the whole world and within that Tolkien created, and kind of expressing some of those things and including those extra things in your painting. Like, there's no reason why when any of the paintings we've created that you can't add a little bit of your own little flair and add little characters or things that are important to you in your paintings. I encourage it. Absolutely. You know, we'll see here a few people modify the Mona Lisa in their own way, and I think that's also very, very fun. Just because it's, you know, I always think like that you, the creator of your artwork, you are the first audience member to your own artwork, and you have to be able to enjoy your artwork. Like, if you're making artwork for other people, just like if you're doing anything else for other people, you know, you can get satisfaction out of it. But if you're doing something that brings you like that intrinsic satisfaction, then you're going to want to do more and more of it. I always like, you know, I see Deborah saying, I'm so glad that I made you laugh. I was hoping that it would. You know, I often am laughing at my own artwork. Like, as I'm painting it, I can't tell you how many times I'm just like, what are you doing? This is so weird. And I can understand why that could be terrifying. If you're making a painting, you're like, whoa, like, what is happening? Like, oh, this is gross or weird. Or, I can't believe I did that. That could be one reaction of like disgust, revulsion, terror, like confusion. I personally like to see it in the complete opposite way of like kind of excitement and surprise and pleasure and delight of being like how what is, you know, what am I tapping into, or what is in the food or the water I'm drinking, or what in the back of my mind, weird memories that is causing this thing to appear from my fingers onto the canvas. And I think if you can have that experience where you're delighted by the weirdness of what you create, then I think you're more excited to want to go into the studio and to make more stuff, because it's like watching a thriller movie and you're like, I have no idea what's going to happen. Like, okay, I can't go to sleep. I'm going to stay up and finish this movie because I got to find out how this ends, right? And I think what I want when I'm painting is I want that same experience where I'm painting And my wife's like, you know, we're gonna have dinner in 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go on without me. I'm just gonna keep on painting here. And then at like 3 in the morning, I emerge from the studio like, oh, I haven't had breakfast. I'm so and because I'm just like, I've got to see where this goes, right? I don't know where it's going. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what I'm doing, but it's kind of weird and fun and crazy. I want that experience every time I'm making artwork. So. So Deborah's saying, I was hoping that you laughed at my Darth Vader with sneakers. I haven't actually seen. Maybe maybe I didn't look at it close enough because I was just pulling them in here. So we'll see when we get there. May says, I saw the Van Gogh exhibition yesterday downtown, and he used a lot of texture. Van Gogh exhibition? What? Are you in Vancouver? Was there at the Vancouver Art Gallery? I was just there a few weeks ago. I think there was a show opening soon. I didn't realize there was a Van Gogh thing there, though. I'm assuming you're in Vancouver. Maybe you're in New York. I have no idea. Oh no, because you've been in my classes before, so obvious. But maybe you're traveling. I have no idea. But yes, we're talking about texture, May. Yes, Van Gogh used a lot of texture. Van Gogh is famous for his texture, so much so that when he was painting, creating his first, you know, those early paintings of his, texture was not really something artists explored or used much at all. I think most of the time artists went out of their way to avoid texture, and that would have been one reason why he famously didn't sell any. I think he sold one painting to like his brother was an art dealer, had an art gallery, and I think his brother sold a few of his paintings, or at least bought a few for himself and was sending his brother money. But I probably Van Gogh's use of texture would have been one of the reasons why he might have turned a number of collectors off, because it was just so weird and so different. They're like, what am I even looking at? Like, no one does this. So, you know, it's, yeah, that would have been very, very, very strange for that particular period of time. So, but, you know, we all know what happened to Van Gogh. Like, one of the most successful artists, unfortunately he died and didn't get to appreciate his success, but certainly the world has sort of come around to appreciate and see his art, and his use of texture and color and contrast, etc. Joshua says, does using, let me see, let's get the original here up while I'm talking about this. Does using a projector help with drawing or no? Just a question because I got a hold of a tracing projector yesterday. So does a projector help? Yeah, I have a video projector. I have one of those overhead transparency projectors. It's probably been 10-15 years since I've used it, if it still works. I used to use projectors all the time. I love projectors, video projectors. There's these, I don't know if it's what you're talking about, Joshua, but there's these smaller, less expensive ones that are about like this big, that have like a big lens in front that you can put like a drawing. Like you can even set them right on top of a sketchbook and it'll project it onto a wall. They work really well. In fact, actually, speaking of which, now that I'm a YouTuber, I won't even open this right now, but because I'm going to do a video of it, but someone in the Netherlands sent me this device that supposedly helps people draw. And so I'm going to do a whole video on it, and I'll explore it and see if it works, and if it works I'll recommend it, and if not I won't. But obviously, you know, using the tracings I provide and using the carbon paper or graphite paper to transfer that into canvas is a lot like using a projector. I think it's actually a little bit easier than using a projector, because one of the weird things with using a projector is you often have to have all the lights off to see what you're drawing, and that can be, it's actually pretty tricky to do, because it can be hard to see the difference between the projected image and what you've drawn on the canvas or paper. And if somebody bumps the projector, oh my goodness, sometimes you have to start again because it's trying to match it back up again. It's just a major headache. Yeah, I know that there's people out there who will say it's cheating and that it is like, you know, it's not, it makes you a fake or whatever. I mean, I don't know what to say to those things except the fact that like almost every artist that we've been talking about, whether it's Leonardo or I mean, almost every single artist has used a lens of some kind to help them with their drawing process, less so with the painting process. Vermeer, famously, there's a great movie, a documentary, it was nominated for an Academy Award, called Tim's Vermeer. Great movie. If you haven't seen it, I think we talked about it during the Vermeer episode, but if you haven't seen it, it's a great movie, well worth a watch tonight if you're looking for something to watch. I think it might be on Netflix. Tim's Vermeer, like Tim, Tiny Tim, I don't know. Just, it's all about like this guy trying to reproduce a Vermeer painting in the way that Vermeer did. Another great series of documentaries, David Hockney's, I think I even have the book somewhere here, called The Secret Knowledge. Look up David Hockney. Remember we did a painting of his two dogs laying on a little bed. He did a whole exploration of lenses and art. I actually filmed something. I haven't finished editing it, but eventually it'll be up there. That is basically just shows how all the most famous artists used these devices to help them with the drawing process. And if you really think about it, any artist would use whatever tool is available to help them make their work faster and better. Anyway, I digress. Eleanor says, "Hi everyone, I just logged on, but late enjoying it." May says, I painted the Tolkien on in landscape format so that the small details like Bilbo would be a little larger and easier to paint. I also wanted the emphasis on the river scene, not on the trees. Very cool. Okay, I get it. May says the convention center downtown is where the Van Gogh. Oh. So you put a link to it. Okay, I gotta see this here. May put a link to the Van Gogh exhibition. Oh, okay. So here, sorry. So here's a link that May just posted here on the Facebook group. Okay, so there's this, I haven't seen this. I don't know if it's by the same group in Paris. There is a museum that, oh yeah, maybe, is this the same? I don't know. Interesting. So there's a whole museum in Paris that is dedicated to these fully immersive video projections rooms that have paintings by famous artists in them, and you can go in and they animate the paintings. I think my wife, actually I'm sure my wife mentioned it. She's probably sitting upstairs like, yes, we've talked about this already. Can't believe you don't remember. Anyway, very cool. Thanks for reminding me about that, May. Yeah, it's very cool. I want to check that out for sure. Gail says, I bought a Lucy, and it's a type of projector basically, but it's really hard to use and falls apart easily. Hard to keep in place. I don't like it. Yeah. That's another thing I have that I have to review that was sent to me It's I'll just, since we're just talking about it really quickly. If you're at all interested, I'll eventually do. Oh, I haven't even opened it yet, because I'm getting contacted by all these different people these days about reviewing different products, and so this one it's called the Lucy Camera Lucida, and it is this device that you can use to help with your drawing process. And anyway, yeah, I'll do a video that eventually that'll come down the pipeline probably next month or so. But yeah, so Gail, maybe I'll explore it and see what I think. Maybe I can help solve any problems, or maybe maybe we'll come to the same conclusion that it falls apart too easily and can't keep in place. I have heard all of that too. And there's also an app that I got for the iPad that does the same sort of thing too. Irene says, that one, I saw it in Montreal in January 2020. It was amazing. It's coming to Edmonton whenever we are open again. Okay, so let's continue. Great discussion. I love all these comments. These are fantastic. Okay, so let's take a look at Sherry Boyle's here, the big one, this cool surfing painting. And where should we go? I think we've got about 11 paintings people have made here. So here's May's version of it. Very cool, May. Cool. I like all of the waves and the droplets of water coming off here. I like how you've got these different blues, and we add more and more gray in here and tone it down so it gets a little bit less vibrant as we go further into the background, which we would expect to happen, right? As colors recede, they lose their saturation, right? If you look at a mountain that's far away and you look at a mountain that's closer, if you were standing next, or even if you were like you've got a plant in front of you and you're looking at a mountain far away, or even if you're just looking at something across your room, you will notice that whatever's closer to you is going to be, not even focus wise, but just think about the color and the saturation of the color. Things that are closer to you are going to have more saturated color than anything even just across the room, never mind on the other side of a valley or the road or or by the horizon, etc. So the more gray or white that we put into a color as it recedes from us, the more we're going to help create that illusion of distance. One thing I would say is they are getting darker, and we're a little bit darker. They're less intense, but they're also, like you can see with hers, these are darker but more intense colors, and as we go, there's more and more white. There's a little bit of gray in here in her original. So I would just say that if we were to do this one again, that we would, when we're mixing these grays, that these grays would maybe want to get a little bit lighter. It's not so dark, because that way they're not competing so much with these colors down here. Otherwise, fantastic. I love it. I mean, what am I going to say? It looks great. Good job, May. Here's Molly's version of the painting. Interesting. Wow. I wonder... I guess I can just enlarge that. Huh. Very nice, Molly. Looks good. I love how when we go right up the top here, it's almost invisible. Like in terms of the blue that you've put over here, it's almost like the same color as the canvas itself, right? That's really nice. I also noticed that you didn't put that drippy dark purple that I put on mine, which I think was a mistake on my part. And also, you know, this is Sherry's original, and she barely had mine. I put on there quite thick and dark, but you know, it's as I always say, sometimes watching me do whatever I do, you can always be like, okay, good, I'm glad that he did that, because that way I don't have to do it. I'm gonna completely ignore that step, right? So This looks really, really nice, Molly. This is a very successful version of this painting. Very interesting too. It almost looks too like this white is almost kind of coming forward on top, right? It creates an interesting optical illusion, which is, I think, the point of this painting. Ooh, look at that, Peter. Wow. Also very different, right? Like, we have this transition to these lighter grays here. I would think we may want to have a little bit of a softer trend, because it's pretty abrupt here from these blues, these cold blues into here. But, you know, again, nitpicking, but very cool. Oh, so this is a little bit closer to the way that the drips that I tried to put on there. Looks great though. I mean, I think this was a fun one. So, wow. Okay, here's Sue's version, and Sue's outlined everything with black. That's an interesting strategy. I wonder why you took this approach. I think it looks great. It's just very different. That probably putting that black line kind of helped separate, really create a difference between the waves and this rainbow wave, I guess, in the center, this main feature. It makes it very illustrative, and I've been using that word many times, but we often are very graphic, right? In the sense that it's like like we often use when we talk about like something as graphic in art, that it's very drawing oriented as opposed to color oriented, and putting outlines like that. It's interesting. It's a very different approach, which I love to see, because it's nice to see how different people approach these paintings. It really creates a separation. Like when we put a black line around something, it works like a stained glass window, and then you have two separate things, are very, very separate, like a very hard edge. And you know, there's plenty of artists throughout history who've really amped up that outlining process, but certainly over the past 100 years, it's become like a go-to strategy. And obviously in comic books is where we see that mostly these days. Although actually more recent comic books don't use outlines as much, because the printing process has become so good that artists can reproduce like painted images in cheap comic books in a way that they weren't able to do back in like the 50s and 60s, etc. Anyway, let's move forward here. These are great. Wow. Look at this. Here's Susan's painting. Ah, interesting. It looks almost like Susan's taken a different approach here, and potentially, if I was to surmise, what she's done is maybe painted the whole thing blue, or painted it in gradations going up here, and then painted white and lines over top of different strengths to create those that effect of things kind of getting lighter as they go. That's an interesting strategy. I did not think of this when I was thinking of how to paint this painting, but it definitely works. This would probably be the fastest way to execute this painting. Now that I see it, it didn't even occur to me. But now that I see it, this is probably the most logical approach to making this painting as quickly as possible. Huh. That's great. What I love about this is we have all these different artists who are part of this community, and everyone brings their own knowledge and experiences and references to artworks they've seen, some of which I haven't seen before, and we all kind of come to the class, and yeah, I'm the one who's making the painting on the screen, but obviously, as we see, other people are like, oh, okay, it's interesting the way he's doing it. It's not the way I'm going to do it, but I'm going to, and then we all come together and we kind kind of download them all together, and we can see how everyone else approaches these things. So that is very cool. Really cool to see. And again, that takes confidence to approach it differently than I'm doing it, right? That makes me really excited, Susan. Great job. Wow, Vanya, look at that. Again, a very different, like, a kind of approach. Same sort of thing. Like, there's a lot of fearlessness with the way that you painted up here, and not really worrying about keeping any of that white in between things. So this feels like you were like really just attacking this canvas, and you drew it freehand, right, to get, you know. So this is also really cool. This makes me really excited too, because this mark making, to paint it like that feels like you're painting pretty quickly, right? And generally when you're painting quickly, you have a certain level of confidence, because you're feeling like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to do this, blah 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 blah, right? And you know, versus people who are going really slowly, often it's because they're much more anxious about making mistakes. So they're thinking, if I go really slow, then I can stop a mistake before it gets too far, right? So to paint quickly like that and brushstrokes like that shows a tremendous amount of confidence, which is great. I really think making art is all about getting more and more confident. Wow. And then here's Charmai's version. Wow, cool. I love the way you did these waves down here. Look at that. Really nice, soft transition as we go back up here. You know, and I really liked, again, the way that you reworked some of this in here. It really feels like, almost like I can feel a swirl of water. So again, very different in that, you know, the original, it's like there's this wave that's sort of cutting through things, or it's like overlapped, like we could even have taped it off and done this painting, versus what Charmai has done here, especially down here. It's almost like these are like these little tide pools that are forming around here, and we see like the water kind of swirling within. Very different, but I really like that. That's really cool. And I like the way that you did the drop, the drips at the top that I bungled. But very good. Wow. Okay. Let me just see. Cool. Great comments, you guys. Okay, so let's move on here. What did we do? We haven't looked at Leonardo's, right? Okay. Let's pull up these masterpieces. Okay, where are we? I was gonna say, where's the original? Okay. So, let's take a look at Leonardo's Mona Lisa here. So here's the quote-unquote the original of the original image, and then here is the digital restoration. This is one that Deborah posted that she found. This was a reworked version that she found online that tried to kind of bring the original colors as Leonardo would have painted them back, and you can see how this painting has deteriorated over the centuries, right? And this is not uncommon. This happens quite frequently. Like, there's a few different reasons, one of which is you know, curator or conservators and collectors, because this painting has changed hands a few times over the centuries, and people who mean really well want to try to preserve it. That it was, you know, Leonardo was, you know, a famous inventor of all sorts of different objects and things. But one of the things that he was always tinkering with was the was with his paint. He was always trying to use different mixtures and mediums to make paints that were better than what was available to him, right? And sometimes it worked. Obviously, the Mona Lisa has survived relatively well intact, but as we talked about when we were looking at Leonardo, his Last Supper was falling apart as he was painting it, right? And the fact that it even exists, even in, I mean, if you've ever seen it, you can look it up right now. There's barely any. It looks like this ghosted image. It's kind of, you're like, you kind of have to have like a poster or something to look at it, because it's faded so badly and peeled off. Never mind the fact that the building it was in was bombed during World War II, and a bomb literally fell right in, blew out the roof, but the painting, which was on the wall, so it wasn't like they couldn't take the wall away and hide it, miraculously survived, but I'm sure obviously took a little bit of abuse. Anyway, so this is what it looks like today, but this is what it would have looked. This is an artist's interpretation of what it could have looked like 500 years ago, which is obviously, has some really gorgeous colors in here that are kind of have been. It's debatable as to if we cleaned this today, whether it could ever get back to the state, because some of those pigments have faded. He was, again, anyway, so I'll just keep repeating myself. But so where should we go? How we start down here? Charmai's version of the painting. Very cool. So this looks like Charmai was painting from the digital restoration here, because we see these really nice reds that are underneath this kind of shawl that she's wearing. We even see some of the eyebrows, right? If you think about the way we've seen the Mona Lisa today, her eyebrows have disappeared, right? But they were there. It's just that they faded over the course of 500 years. Very interesting. I love the way you painted these fingers. Very delicate. Her face looks gorgeous. The background looks beautiful. And again, I really love the way that you did this. I mean, if I was to say my favorite part of this, these curls in the hair are gorgeous. A lot of things are working really well. But it is these folds in the fabric and the folds underneath this, like, this semi-reflective shawl, like semi-transparent kind of thing, that is absolutely fantastic. That is gorgeous. Really, really well done. Oh, and then so I forgot. Okay, so there's two versions. Here's, I didn't even realize. Sometimes you guys you post one and then you think about it for a little bit, and then you post another one. So here's, I guess this is the finished version, the final version. Let me just see. Very subtle. The main thing I'm noticing is right here. What else did you change? Not sure if I can see much else different, but anyway, maybe there's a little bit more contrast down here on her lap. It's a little bit darker, which is great, because that's where we would expect it to be a little bit darker as it goes down there. Yeah, it looks fantastic, beautiful, really cool. I also like that. I thought these were like some kind of, like, poop emojis or something. These little things off on the side. I forgot. The Mona Lisa was stolen in 1912 or something, around 1909, right before World War I. It was stolen. There's a really great book about that whole incident called Portrait of Picasso as a Young Man by Norman Mailer, and it talks about, like, the theft of the Mona Lisa. And Picasso was arrested. They strongly suspected that Picasso was guilty of having stolen the Mona Lisa, because him and his friends would go into the Mona Lisa and steal these little African sculptures that were there, these little tiny things. They would just put them in their pocket, and word kind of got around, so he was rounded up as potentially the person that stole the Mona Lisa. And they talk about this, him and Apollinaire, who was Guillaume Apollinaire, who was a famous writer and a great friend of Picasso's, and later one of the an important surrealist, founder of surrealism. Him and Apollinaire were rounded up, but the night before, they loaded all of their stolen antiques that they had stolen from the Louvre and like ran around Paris and dumped them over a bridge into the river. Somebody's got to make a movie of it because it's just like so unbelievable. Anyway, I don't know why I'm telling that story, but it's just so bizarre. Anyway, oh, I think the reason I'm telling you is because they cut the Mona Lisa out of the frame, if I recall, and then I think rolled it up. How did they? So anyway, I think that's why the image that we have of it, because I don't know why, if they were able to restore it properly. So if we go back to this being the original, you see these posts, right? We're on a balcony, and this is like the posts that are supporting like the overhead, versus this version. Maybe it's just cropped, but and maybe this is the restoration, or where they tried to fix it when it was cut out of the frame. I cannot remember. Anyway, I just remember when we were talking about that painting, I was like, what are these big blobs that are on the right? Anyway, great painting. I'm gonna move on. Vanya, wow, look at that. Cool. Ah, I love your sky up back here. Now we see these, there's probably a glaze, this light blue glaze, and we see these streaks of the glaze on here. It doesn't bother me. I don't mind. Again, I have no problem with texture. The one thing I would say is, if you're going to do something, there's two things you could do. Is one, if you want the texture, is to really consider, like we were talking about this when we were talking about maze painting, if you really want that texture, then think about like how we can use that texture, because right now it seems it doesn't seem like it was that texture is necessarily doing anything, right? Like beyond obviously modifying the colors underneath, but like I could see you taking that texture and kind of creating radiating lines coming from her head, right? Like, you know, like a sunrise and sunbeams coming out, going in these different directions. I could see that. Or, you know, you could use a glaze like that. It could spell a word or another shape or all sorts of things. But if you do not want the texture, then I think you would want to kind of apply it there, and then maybe very carefully try to go very quickly to kind of blend some of those these brush strokes out, or kind of using a mop brush to just sort of soften those lines. That would be what I would suggest. I don't mind it. I just it is they are very apparent, I guess is what I would say. And there's kind of this halo around here where we didn't kind of go right up to her hair. The hands look fantastic. These folds are great. Good job. And here's Susan's version of the painting. Interesting. Wow, very different. You know, obviously, like, look how strikingly different these paintings are. I love these colors. I love this dark aquamarine, or not aquamarine, ultramarine blue. Nice warm uses of warm and cool colors. Excuse me. And then you went into the face here and you put in, I think, one of the things that I would say about the Mona Lisa is her features are painted with like exceptional subtlety, right? That's the trademark of the Mona Lisa, is like her smile, for instance. Is she smiling, or is she frowning, or what is the expression on her face, right? And we don't quite know, because he's painted in such a soft way that, like, we don't even really know which way the corners of her lips are upturned or downturned. So you've taken a very different approach here, which is to make very bold lines and very like, again, I think we've been talking with your work, there's a lot of contrast in a very graphic approach to your painting, which I think is fantastic. The only thing I would say is this makes your painting very like very stylized. Like it becomes very much your own painting, as opposed to like Leonardo's painting, which is great. You know, I want to encourage people to be more and more expressive and to share their own style. So ultimately what I'm saying is, to me, this suggests that there's two things you can do, is to kind of, when you're painting other people's painting, is to really be very fearless about letting that your propensity for contrast to really come through, because there's a lot of confidence that you're displaying that way. Is to do that, or to really find other artworks where you see like really strong contrast, which again we really see that in pop art imagery, and what else do we see that? So like paintings from the 1960s to 80s have a lot of contrast. Children's book illustration, comic books have a lot of contrast. There's got to be, well, medieval paintings like the Fra Angelico and prior to that have a lot of contrast, right? They are very, very graphic paintings, right? Just because the materials and tools they have are fairly rudimentary, and you know, there a lot of stained glass windows. Everything is like, it's a very super simplified, very iconic kind of imagery. One thing I would say is there is a little bit of kind of darkness around her lips, and even these lines around her nose and everything and under her eyebrows they're pretty strong, and not necessarily bad, but it does make it look maybe a little bit more masculine. One of the things that artists, and this is a convention artists have been using for hundreds of years, is often when you paint like male faces, is to be very strong with the lines, like strong lines on noses, lips, chin, jaw, eyes, and all that kind of stuff, ears. And it's, you know, it begs the question, is it just 500 years of artists painting that way that we identify those with very more masculine traits, or is there something inherently masculine about a darker lines? An interesting philosophical question, but regardless, that is sort of how we kind of read images these days. So this to me looks a little bit more like a 5 o'clock shadow, a little bit happening here around her lips. And it's really, I mean, this is one of the best paintings in human history, and to kind of nail this is tough. The same thing also with these hands, is they're a little bit bigger and chunkier kinds of hands, which we also tend to identify with more kind of a masculine physique. Having said that, there's people have written books and PhDs that are convinced that this is the actual Mona Lisa is a self-portrait of Leonardo, like dressed up in drag. Right? I mean, I'm not kidding. There's many people, like very smart, intellectual, PhD, you know, professors, who will argue to the death that this is not a painting of a woman, but a painting of Leonardo in drag. So maybe that's possible. And again, I'm not saying, I don't mean to denigrate your work at all. I'm just saying these are just things that I'm noticing as I'm looking at the painting. Having said that, I love the way that you painted everything in here. Like, I love the way that the hands are painted, etc. just something to kind of be thinking about is because one of the most obvious ways that artists tend to paint female figures is to really de-emphasize the nose. So often when you see people paint female figures, they de-emphasize the nose to such an extent that they may not even paint the bridge of the nose, and they might only just paint the nostrils. You see this in comic books a lot, right? So this, and also, not, some of the, like the bags under the eyes, artists will kind of omit those in order to kind of make the face look a little bit more youthful, etc. It's painting. I know some people have said, oh, we've been painting a lot of female figures and not a lot of male figures, which is something that when we get close to Father's Day, I've got a whole idea of what I want to do when we get there, so that we'll catch up on some of those male portraits for some people who want to do a little bit more of that. But one of the reasons why we've painted a number of female faces is because they are, in a way, a little bit trickier. So I've been kind of because it's kind of easy to make any face look masculine. It's a little bit trickier to make faces look more feminine, because there's a lot more subtlety that you end up having to put in the portrait to pull that off. So that's one of the kind of things I've kind of been trying to put in there, is because it makes us have to work a little bit harder. Anyway, I'm gonna move on here. Shelly, wow, look at some talk about a different approach, right? We talk about even just these two paintings side by side. Like Shelly's is, almost no lines whatsoever in this painting. And everything is very soft edges. We have like almost a smooth transition from one shape to another, not just from colors, in shadows. Let's say like on her chest here, it's dark and then we lighten up, right? Or on her face, it's light and then we get darker. Really nice, soft transitions. Not a lot of blending here. More just, I know you have done blending in here, not that you haven't, but we see, they're almost like a pointillist, impressionist version of the Mona Lisa, which is really interesting. So it's very soft, right? Very soft edges, especially when we go into the background, which gives it that out of focus quality. So that's what's so cool, seeing these paintings back to back, is it's very striking to see different people's styles kind of through here. And then this is May's version, very cool. I think there's looks like a reflection in the photograph on the face, which is a little bit unfortunate because we can't quite see some of those details. Or potentially there's a glaze over top of there that has kind of removed some of the contrast. So, which maybe that's what you're doing. What I would, if you want to bring this painting, because maybe that's what it is there. It might be a glaze, like on the lips and nose and everything. So everything's been muted a bit. I would suggest, if this was my painting, what I might do is just kind of go back and add like a little bit of, darkness, let's say on her hair. Just bring out kind of this edge a little bit, and maybe outline like the top eyelid, and maybe darken, like, say, her irises a little bit, because right now we've got these tiny little pupils and really dark or light brown irises, and maybe just underneath the nose and a line between the lips, like not with a black, but with like a very muted, like, let's say dark red here, and then like a muted kind of like a grayish brown that you could use just to kind of pull a little bit of that contrast back that looks like it's been removed a bit. Because you have all these beautiful contrasts, like dark contrast in the clothing down here, but when it comes to the eyes and some of the facial features, that has been removed. So how do I move Okay, we've got a bunch more still. Let's keep on moving forward. Wow, great job, Heidi. Great. Very nice version of the eyes in particular. Like, very nice, subtle version of those facial features. Same thing. Like, you've done the nose. Is there, but not as. It's still actually quite prominent, but it doesn't leap out to me too much. I think which is walking a very, very tight rope, right? Really cool. I don't know. What do I say with this one? I don't really have much to say. I really like what you've done here on her clothing and the fabric. Really nice. And the background is really nice and soft. Very cool. Yeah, I like these. I never really... As I've seen a few of these paintings, one of the things I'm just in the back of my mind thinking a lot is is it just me, or does these eyes... I keep thinking of, like, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and, there's, like, that look that we see in these Egyptian, like, carvings, and anyway, it's totally different, random. Let's go here to Gails' painting. Wow, interesting. So what we see here, some very sharp cheekbones on the Mona Lisa here. This is the Mona Lisa after she's had her facelift. She looks, this is great. I mean, and all kidding aside, I think you've done a really, really great job. It is, you know, a little bit of a sharp jaw. So it doesn't, you know, I have no problem with people manipulating the facial features. And again, this is, by me putting the Mona Lisa in here and expecting us to try to paint the Mona Lisa, I just, like, put the bar really, really high as almost a little bit of a joke. It's like, how can we even get in the ballpark? And all of you guys have certainly gotten into the ballpark, which surprised me, because you know, this is a tall task, and you guys rose to the occasion. So the fact that there might be some discrepancies when you're trying to paint the greatest painting arguably of all time, I mean, you know, the fact that we could do any version of it whatsoever is very impressive. So I think maybe what happened here is right along this, when we painted a little bit darker underneath the jaw here, might have cut in a little bit close and chopped this part of her chin off. Not a big deal. It does make her jaw look, you know, again, a little bit more masculine in that sense, like it's kind of pretty sharp, or that she's maybe had a little chin implant. I think if I was going to try to fix this, I might consider just softening this part of her cheek down a little bit. The only thing I would, I think you could get away with it. The only thing I would fear is that then you'd be like, oh, now I got to go here, and then you're in this sort of like arms race where it keeps going up, and before you know it, the chin is right underneath the eyes or something, right? So it's just one of those things that you learn as you're painting, especially when you start kind of getting, because this was probably towards the end of the painting when we got here, and you know, it's one of those things you just save and you put in your back pocket for the next painting, right? All the answers to the next painting are in the painting you're working on right now. So I was looking at all these comments here. Joshua says, just realized you haven't covered Leonardo da Vinci's artwork yet. But everyone's artwork looks amazing. I applaud everyone. Yes. I'm not, yeah. So, Rena says, so amazing, great talent. I can't wait to join you all soon. Rena, yes, absolutely, join us soon. I don't know if you're a part of the Facebook group, but join us up, take some of the classes, paint along with us. Be great. Irene says, or yeah, May says, Yeah, more the merrier. Irene says, LOL, except for someone like me who has man hands. Well, you know, I mean, who knows what the Mona Lisa, what her actual physique was like and what her body was like. There's nothing, I mean, one of the things I think is most interesting about Frida Kahlo is how she really challenged, like, ideas of, like, femininity and, you know, with her eyebrows and her mustache, and it's, you know, it's so much so that it's super iconic, and I think it gave a lot of other people permission to embrace their own bodies, and so I think what's most interesting is people should be free to be whoever they want to be and to not feel ashamed of their body. When I say that the hands looked a little bit more masculine, you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing either, right? Anyway, here's we have 3 more Mona Lisas to cover here. Dolores, look at that, very soft features, beautiful job. I wonder, is it really that soft, or is this just slightly out of focus? I don't know, but either way, I mean, look, it's a pretty darn good job. Like, really nice, soft transitions in this face. You nailed the eyes, you nailed the nose and the lips really, really well. Wow, that is very impressive. I don't have a lot to say about this. I am very, very impressed. You know, if you recall just what I was saying, was I talking about May's potential? Yeah, I think when all this, yeah, I was talking about May and adding a little bit of that line on her top eyelid, just to kind of darken that. I think, you know, let's say if we go back to here, you can see how just a little bit of extra lines there would help, you know, a little darker underneath that chin, just as you've done. Really fantastic. You know, that's one of the things that, like, contrast, adding dark into those shadowy areas is one of the things that is, I think, often the scariest thing for artists. You know, going to the contrast, going to the extremes of the values, where the highlights are and where the extreme shadows are. And I've been guilty of it for sure during some of, not guilty of it, but just out of, like, time, like when I'm painting here and I'm like, oh man, we're like 4 hours into painting, and I'm still, like, in this range of values, and when the range of values that is possible is much larger, and, you know, it's about going further and further. I have seen, and I remember I had a painting teacher once talk about how the first thing you should lay down are your brightest and your darkest colors right off the bat. It's not the way that I paint. I tend to kind of build from the center and go outwards, but I do understand that wisdom a lot, because that is, and that might be kind of good advice for some other people in the class, in that, because some people feel like if you've been painting on a painting for 3 hours and then someone says to you, okay, make that shadow really dark and make that highlight really bright, and they're like, oh, you mean, like, you want me to take black and put it there and put white? Like, that's like, those are so extreme, and I feel like, I don't know if I put that there, I have a chance of ruining all the work I just put into the painting. So that tends, that when I encourage people to do that, I think some people just look at me like, yeah, right, okay, sure. I'm gonna just basically potentially deface the thing I just spent all this time on. So the advice that I've had given to me many years ago was to do kind of the opposite. It was to go directly to the darkest darks and the brightest brights really at the beginning of the painting process, so that you've already gone there and you're, you know, an hour into the painting, rather than the 3 hour or 3 day, 3 month period of time. going into the dark extremes where it feels like there's a lot more at stake when you do that. Whereas if you do that at the beginning of the painting process, then it's sort of like, oh, well, you know, it's like, how can I ruin a painting when the painting is hardly begun, right? So that could be a strategy for some people out there, is to, you know, we'll do a painting like that. We'll go right to the extremes right off the bat, and that might be a helpful process for some people out there who are a little bit more timid when it comes to really exercising the full potential of value when it comes to painting. So, but yeah, so because contrast is really how we give volume to form. And here's Deborah's version of the Mona Lisa. Wow, very different. I really like how you really made the shawl on her head like very, very visible, right? That's one of the things that over time has disappeared, but you've really brought it out. It actually really transforms this painting. It almost, it turns it into almost an unrecognizable version of the Mona Lisa, and not in a bad way, just that you're sort of painting the Mona Lisa how it was in such a way that we don't even really, it's like, oh, that's the Mona Lisa, interesting. Oh, well, you've given her a shawl, and then you're like, no, actually, well, that's kind of, this is what the painting looked like when it was fresh. I've actually done a more, quote-unquote, truer recreation than like the one you see currently at the Louvre. So an interesting process and strategy here, decisions. And obviously, so you were working from the remastered version rather than the one that I was working from, which would, you know, maybe next year I'll come back around and I'll do my version of this one. I'll redo it, but as a with the original colors, etc. I like everything that's going on here. What is there anything I can offer? Don't know. I don't know. Maybe this white line here, maybe could be continued a little bit more into the eyebrow ridge. Maybe. Again, it looks like she's lost a little bit of weight, and this kind of reminds me a little bit of Gails' painting here, with kind of cutting in on the chin a little bit here. Because Mona Lisa in the original, she looked, you know, she has that kind of like that baby face kind of quality, right? A little bit rounder of facial features, and so you've made her look like a little bit thinner in the face and a little bit narrower of a nose. It doesn't bother me. I just think those are interesting decisions, and really cool. Let's see here, Gemini's version of the Mona Lisa, right? Very different. So the intention was to honor women of color in art. I loved that idea. Really cool. So I love that you changed a number of things here, not only the hair and obviously the skin color and the race of the Mona Lisa, but even like the color of the clothing looks like like there's this, you know, the red and the blue and the yellow, you know, that reminds me a little bit of, and even this kind of green of like the South African flag potentially. Really cool. I mean, this is great. I love it when people take liberties with these artworks and give them their own little spin. Yeah, I mean, it's super creative. You know, one little tiny thing, and it just has nothing to do with like those choices. I think I'd have to. This yellow on the balcony in behind seems a little bit strong to me, and a little bit distracting from the overall, from her figure in the foreground. What I would suggest would be to just glaze over this with something else, like a what would I put there? Maybe just a little bit of a grayish yellow, just to tone that down a little bit, because we have all this really nice bright yellows in her clothing. I think it's great, and you've given her blonde hair, which is fantastic. I think because then this yellow is really the brightest yellow on the canvas, and yet it's in the background and in an area that is not overly interesting, you know, not in your painting, but in the original, right? This is just like the balcony, but because it's so bright, it's drawing our eyes right to it. Like, what I would say, you know, this bright yellow would work really well for, let's say, on the top of her bodice there, or even highlights maybe in her hair, in the same way that you've got on this robe here. But in the background, and I think this is probably almost like the original color, would be just to, oops, I gotta plug something in here. I've got to, I think a battery just died. 1 second. Let's see if I can turn this back on, if it will. There's always a little bit of something. So let's see if that comes back. Okay, it looks like that's good. Yeah, so, I mean, as I said, I mean, I'm nitpicking. I've been nitpicking all afternoon. May says, thanks on the tips on my Mona Lisa. I'll work more on it. I'll work on it more, sorry. Deborah says, thanks, Michael. My Mona Lisa lost weight. Laugh out loud. I see now that I could add a bit to her cheek. If we just go back up here, I mean, it is a little bit, I would caution you, as much as I would be excited for you to add more to it, going in here and starting to rework this area is a little bit risky. Even I would feel a little bit risky going in there, because you might want to paint white right here, and then you'd have to kind of mix it to get it. You have to mix a similar kind of pink on top, which is not impossible, and it might be a good exercise for you to do that. And you do have a photograph of it if the worst should happen. But it would take a lot of courage to go back in and make some alteration in your painting in such like a central part of the painting. My recommendation would be, if you really want it, would be to consider doing another version of it. I know you're like, are you kidding me? But I would say that if you did this painting a second time, I guarantee you it would be a way better painting. Not that this is not a good painting, but I always think the second time you make anything, it just is going to get better and better and better, because you're taking all the lessons you've learned and you're applying it to the next version of it. Okay. Wow, we've got so much great. Okay. How do I want to do this next part here? I want to try to wrap up in about half an hour, but I want to get to a few things. And I don't know how much of this I shared in the last episode. I was like furiously putting all these images. I wanted to kind of review the previous episode to see how far we got, and I didn't get a chance, so I'm not so I'm going to kind of blaze through a few things here so that and then you tell me if we've seen all this stuff before. Okay. So there might be a little bit of overlap here. So what we're looking at here, this is Deborah's, she was doing the drawing class, and here's just some of her sketches that she uploaded from our drawing class. So anyone who's, just a quick little plug for the drawing class, if you're thinking about doing that, as a few people have mentioned already here in the chat that they're doing it and find it helpful. Again, the link for that is in the video description below to this class as well. And there's a whole bunch of paintings here by Eleanor. I may have shown some of these before. And these I'm pretty sure are by Eleanor this time. So my apologies to whoever who did that great version of the Tolkien that I misattributed to Eleanor. I'll find out later on. But these ones are by Eleanor. So these are she's been doing the course, and I think I showed some of her previous versions last class, but she subsequently continued and uploaded lots more of them. So if you're still watching Eleanor, great job on all of these. Again, this version of the Charles Birchfield painting, not a lot of people did that one, and I think it's one of my favorite. Obviously, we did it. But these look great, really nice. It's great to see. I mean, you did them all in your sketchbook. I would encourage you to think of expanding from the sketchbook onto a canvas boards, and because while having him in a sketchbook is really nice, I think when you take them out, or you could take these out and frame them. I really encourage anyone to start thinking about hanging your artwork in your house. Which reminds me, I got some of these things. I ordered them off Amazon. I'll put a link to them here. This is not something somebody sent me. This is something I bought with my own money. I got these. We've got a number of them. This. Let me see. I'll share the. So this is this company, Articulate Gallery. They make these frames, and they're intended to be for like children's artwork, so that you can slide your kids' artwork in. Right there's a little bit of space in. You can see my fingers can fit in there. So if your kids are making paintings and they're a little, they've got pom-poms and pipe cleaners and stuff on them, they can slip inside of here, and those things don't fall off. But you can, you can hang it onto your wall. Like you could hang it like this, or on its side, right? So you could have a landscape or a portrait version of them. And upstairs in our living room, we've got, because they also make a set one. There's with 4 of them, with 2 landscape and 2 landscape and 2 portrait versions, and then they have another one that's like a triptych, and they make a diptych one too, which is just 2. And I love these things. I think they're so cool. So I got these for my paintings, because my wife got sick of just having all these random paintings stacked up on the television and bookshelves and all these things. So now I can like take a painting and just slide it in there like that, and it looks nice and framed. And you can, I don't have a hook, but you could just hang it right like that. And this is kind of a nice simple way of displaying your work if you don't want to just kind of lean it on something, right? That it's now in a frame, and a frame makes a huge difference. It really just separates an artwork from the busyness of the world around it and focuses our attention on it. The one thing I don't like so much is that they are quite thick, so it kind of cuts off probably about an inch off the full image. So some of the paintings we've done that have imagery that goes right to the edges gets trimmed a little bit. But, this is also, considering that if you put one of these acrylic paintings behind glass or plastic, it is especially plastic or plexiglass, that painting could stick to that plastic, right? The plastic could stick to the plastic, and you might be stuck having that painting in the frame forever. So anyway, I'll put a link for this, because I think these are fantastic, and Why was I saying that? Oh, because I was trying to encourage Eleanor to think about painting on canvas or boards or panels, as opposed to just painting on paper in sketchbook. Or if you want to tear these paintings out of the sketchbook and frame them, I would probably just take the plexiglass out of the frame, and I've got frames. Where's a frame? Oh. Like, so this is a cheap, I get a lot of frames from IKEA. I survived for 10 years in Los Angeles building. I was a carpenter who specialized in building frames and furniture for museums, and I would charge a lot of money to build. Like a frame like this, I would probably charge about $300 to build, and then I would I'd spend that money and go to IKEA and buy myself a $5 frame, just because most people can't tell the difference. But anyway, this I'm not going to open it up, but this is a piece of plexiglass in here. If I was going to use this, I would probably just take the plexiglass out, and then you could just glue or tape your painting to. Just long story short, you just don't want the face of your painting touching the glass or the plexiglass in there, because they're going to stick to it and it's going to pull apart, and it's going to be a very sad day. Okay, so let's just kind of flip through here Eleanor's versions of all these. We've talked about all these paintings by everyone else in the past, and these are fantastic. Great job, Eleanor. Wow, you're just rocking it. Look at that. And these aren't in the right order. They're just how I pulled them out and kind of got all jumbled up, but look at that. Makes me, it's some of these paintings I forgot that we even did, and I'm like, oh yeah, the Morandi painting, right? Renoir and Sonia Delaunay. Great job on that Van Gogh. Really, really good. Oh, and this is kind of funny, because here's your version of the Vermeer, and then here's a version of it next to a much larger one at like IKEA or something. Looks good. It's funny how that's a really big reproduction of that painting. Huh. Cool. That's great. I love it. I think we talked about this before. I know we've looked at a few of these. Joshua sent in a whole bunch of Warhol. I think we talked about these last time. I think this is new. I think this is a new Joshua version of Vermeer. Very nice. Very, very nice. One thing I would just say is back here is just to try to darken, because it's making her neck look her neck might be that thin, but I would transition from the blackness into her neck here, so that I think that's one of the features of Vermeer in this painting, is that, in fact, where do we? Right, yeah, you can see here's the original. See how, like, even this headdress kind of just disappears into the blackness behind in here, and same thing with her neck. That would be what I would encourage you to do, is just to think about darkening this area right in here. Otherwise, it looks great. And here's Laurie, who's also joined us recently. I think we looked at a number of these. Molly's. I remember talking about this. That was fantastic, Molly. My goodness. And Patricia, she's also new to the group. Here's her Vermeer. She's done 2 of them. So this is, I think, the first one, and I thought she said she did a second one. You do look a little bit different, but then I see some stuff down here looks the same. So maybe just redid the face, I think, is what you did. Looks great. The only thing I would say is now the face looks different, but the neck is the previous color, right? So if you're going to do something like that, like even if we're talking about Deborah fixing or changing the Mona Lisa, is you may want, if you do like a radical reversion of a face, is you may want to keep in mind is to kind of take some of that, if you're just glazing, go back over the ears and over the hands, neck, anything that's exposed, feet or knees, that kind of thing. Otherwise, they can kind of look like right now that there's like a lot of makeup, caked on makeup, right? That kind of seems a little bit odd, right? Or jumps out. So you want to just sort of make it look kind of seamless rather than looks like there's some kind of change happened on there. I mean, again, I'm just nitpicking, but wow, look at these. Oh my goodness, wow, good job. And here, I think we talked, Sandra's also joined us. See, I just wanted to really quickly go through these. I know that we've talked ad nauseum about some of these paintings before, but I just want to acknowledge all the great work that people are continuing to do out there. Okay. I also, so let's, I think we will, I think we'll kind of start wrapping up here, because we'll look at the original artwork by those of you in the class. So we've looked at your recreations of all these great paintings. Now let's look at some of the things that you guys have done on your own subsequent. So maybe let's go to the end here, and we'll kind of work our way back up. So here's Shelly's version. I'm not sure if this was a version of something. It does really remind me of like a lot of the Group of 7 paintings that were made, you know, in Algonquin Park and Georgian Bay. You know, this with, you know, very windy shoreline kind of paintings, trees that are bent from, you know, generations of wind coming off the water. Although these mountains in behind seem a little bit big for that part of the world. In Algonquin Park, there's not really big mountains, right? It's much more like little hills. Maybe this is more like a Alberta kind of thing. Maybe in Lake Louise or something. Okay, looks, I mean, great. What could I offer here? I think it would be something, things that I mentioned before, like I would think about maybe things getting a little bit even darker here in the foreground, like a little bit, like a little tiny bit of black or a dark mix to help define some of these shapes here, just to pull the foreground even closer to us. Because right now we have, this ends up being kind of more like a middle ground. So like we kind of middle ground, background, and that little bit more of something in the foreground. And maybe these trees is a foreground, but if that was to be really, oops, I'll get to that in a second, then I would maybe even move that tree closer to us. Yeah, I think, I mean, everything else looks really great. I mean, I love, what's kind of neat here is we've got like the storm clouds on this side and then a bright blue sky over here. Very cool. I like it. This is another one of Shelly's paintings here. This is her granddaughter's cat. I love this. I think this is wild and awesome. Again, when this is, I want to encourage everyone. I think I haven't thought of exactly what I want to do, but I am thinking going at some point forward is to start kind of giving little assignments for people to do outside of class, so that like I might suggest, you know, do a self-portrait this month, or do a painting, make your own still life, or paint your favorite toy or action figure or doll, etc. So that rather than we're all painting exactly what I have in mind, is to really encourage you guys to really start developing and exploring your own interests in painting those things. Because this is great. It's super wild, super idiosyncratic. Like, I would love to know the story behind, like, why all of these streaks of color. You may have posted that in the Facebook comment, I can't remember. But you know, it's just super, like, it's super strange, super bizarre. And that's what I always tell my students at Emily Carr is, like, let your freak flag fly. Like, just whatever bizarre thing that's going on, you know, the thing that you really want to do, that's the thing you gotta do, right? Is just to, who cares what people think? Life is too short to be worried about, like, other people's opinions, and you don't want to be trying to do things that make me happy or anybody else happy. You got to make yourself happy. And if you've got some funky, weird idea in your mind that you want to do, you should do it. And you don't have to show it to anybody, right? You're probably, most of you are making paintings and you disappear into a den or a closet or a furnace room or garage or bedroom or bathroom, and you're making your paintings, and maybe you emerge and you're really happy and you put it on your bookshelf for everyone to see, and there's probably some other paintings you're like, oh, this one is never going to see the light of day after today, right? So there might be a time, like, even you could, while we're painting another painting, and you're like, oh, you know, I don't want to paint that painting. It might be a time for, okay, well, instead of just taking the night off, is to try to make a painting that is important to you, even if it's strange and weird, and you don't have to share it. You don't have to upload it. It could just, you know, you could disappear. You paint over it. You make something else. But I think that would be really fun to see how you guys really start exploring your own interests. Let me see. Patricia says, I tried it 4 times, and so the first one was too gray, so I tried it again and messed up. Which one were we talking about? Oh, the Vermeer. So if I just, as you're saying, I tried 4 times, and so the first one was too gray, and so I tried it again and again and messed up. It is, yeah, it's, I mean, I have a great deal of sympathy for, you know, again, it's one of those things when you're painting, if you, sometimes trying to fix a quote-unquote mistake just makes things worse. And sometimes just letting it go is the best thing to do, because I can't stress this enough. We are the first viewers of our artwork, and we're the creators of the artwork. So of course we're gonna notice every single little brushstroke and detail on there because we painted them. But not everybody is going to have that much attention to detail that we are. Not everyone is going to be looking at the painting this close for 3 hours, right? Most people are going to look at it at least arm's length for maybe 10 seconds and be like, wow, it looks really great. Okay, so what are we going to have for dinner? And you're like, that's all the attention you're going to pay to my painting? Right? And unfortunately, that's how the majority of people experience artwork, right? So sometimes those things that you're just like so upset about are really actually not a problem at all, and just plowing forward and finishing the painting might be just the thing to do. And just go like, okay, you know what, let's try this again. Let's start it over, and probably we'll cut out an hour's worth of like fooling around, because we've already kind of have a pretty close idea of what we want to do because we just did it. Like if I even, like I was thinking about this last night, is as just a potential kind of fun thing to do. If I did every single one of the paintings I've done over, so we're at episode or painting 72, if I did all 72 of them again, I bet every single one of them would look a little bit different, right? I mean, because a lot of the time I'm just coming up with the colors as I see them, and if especially if I had the previous one next to it, I'd be like, oh, okay, now I see, I don't like this color I use in the background, I'm going to mix a different color. I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm going to take a different approach, use a different technique, use a different kind of medium or fluid to get a different effect. So things would be different, and ideally hopefully they would be better, because I would be applying all of the lessons that I've learned the first time around on the next updated version. Anyway, so let's go here to Sharon's flowers here. These are great, Sharon. I love your flowers. I love this is something that you've been working on and getting, again, the more, like, what I feel like you're doing here, because we've got a bunch of them here, is you have a certain amount of fearlessness. Is just to keep on painting. Like, this is great. I love that you even framed this one, because wow, doesn't that look like, talk about, we were talking with May and like the texture. Look how kind of juicy and thick this texture is, and how this texture also complements the form, right? Like, it really feels like these brush strokes feel like the flower petals coming towards us even, right? Really nice use of texture in here. Just kind of go back for a second. Really nice, like, use of darker values here. Oh, great. Like, and these, like, look how expressive and quick these brush strokes feel. It feels like there's a lot of confidence and courage in the way that you're applying paint. So wow, the more confidence you feel to express yourself, that's like, it can be a game changer. That's why we encourage children to learn how to paint and draw, because if they can express themselves with paint, then they feel more confident in the playground, in talking with adults, in riding a bicycle. And you're like, what does riding a bicycle have to do with making a painting in your art class at school? Well, if you can make a painting and you feel like you're doing a pretty good job at painting, it doesn't just lift your confidence in terms of making paintings, but it lifts your overall confidence in every other aspect of life. And you start to be like, yeah, you know what? If I can make a painting, maybe I could go skydiving. Maybe I could pick up violin, or maybe I could try gardening for who knows, right? Because then you just start feeling like, wow, I can do anything, right? Which is why it's such a shame that so many art programs around the country, in North America especially, have been axed in favor of just standardized testing. That's a whole other conversation. Let's take a look at, here's Peter's version. Here's some of his own work that he's been doing on his spare time. I think this is Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy, potentially, the mini Groot. I haven't seen part 2, so maybe this is I think, unless this is something else entirely, but it looks great, Peter. That's funny. And then Peter's done a few other ones here, where this is a friend of his that he's painted, and he did the grisaille method, the painting gray and then putting the color over top of the grape. I think that's what you've done, right? It looks like it. And use that technique. He did it again here, and then put the color over top of the gray with glazes. I have to say, personally, I like these black and white, or like very subtle, like muted colored versions. I think they're superior to the colors. I mean, one of the things that's hard, like, this is a hard technique, right? And we've only done it once when we did the Artemisia Gentileschi painting, is because it is it's kind of seen as a bit of an archaic painting process, as a bit unnecessary. And I think maybe because of that, most people don't teach it. I can't even think, to be honest, of a contemporary artist who uses it. But it is interesting. That's why I wanted to kind of throw it out there, because just to show people that there's infinite ways of putting paint onto a canvas. But I do think the grays have like a really nice, beautiful subtlety to them. Right, both of these, like, this is a gorgeous self-portrait, Peter. Really like this. I think what's happened is the color that you've put over top of these, the glazes, is just a little bit too intense, too bright. And so You may, I don't know if you want to go back over them. I think that might be a lot. But if you were to do these again, I would be very, very subtle with the color that you put over it. Anyway, but I really do appreciate that you, let me see if there was, because I just added this, if I could remember how you did it. Right. Okay, so we're going to keep on moving forward here. We have a bunch of paintings, or a few paintings by Paula. I thought there were more than this. What happened to them? How come they're not all in here? What? This is weird. I spent a bunch of time going through a bunch of messages to find all your paintings, Paula. I apologize, but here's a few of them anyway. Here is an eagle. Oh, I know why. Because we haven't looked at because you've done some of Robert Bateman and everything. We just haven't looked at them yet. And we'll have to do that in our next episode. But here's a few that you've done on your own. Here's an eagle, and this looks a little bit like Donald Trump. Kind of fun version of him there, I think. It could be anybody else, but that red tie and the hair seems kind of Trumpish. Great. And then the cat here licking its paw. Very cool. It looks, this is watercolor, I assume, right? Looks good. I like this one a lot. This is, I think, one of your strongest ones, Paula. I like this. I love these big, big eyes. And the way that the color just seems to be kind of exploding in all directions, kind of going outward in every way. Really cool. I like that one a lot, Paula. And then we have Lori's painting. She was using some kind of paint that is very thick. It was some kind of, and applying it, I think, through like a plastic bag with like a little hole in it, kind of like when you decorate a cake. So that she's kind of got this really nice thick texture. This is, I think, version 1, and then here's a little bit further on with a little bit more paint, and I don't know if it's a little bit much darker on the edges. And oh, I didn't even notice this little like fairy princess or something in the grass. That is really cool. Love that texture. So talk about texture. This looks like it's so thick that, what is this? Looks like a fork or something has been dragged through here to get that grass. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, wow, look, I mean, the way that this is done, it really has that cake kind of feel. Heavy, heavy texture, which I think is fantastic. One thing I think about all the time about heavy textures is it can be a little bit hard to keep clean. They tend to accumulate dust really well, and you got to be very careful. You got texture and cleaning that off. You don't want to use a wet cloth, right, to clean your painting, because you could potentially wipe a bunch of paint right off, even if it's been dry for 10 years. Irene says, I love that. Let your freak flag fly. Heidi says, do what brings you joy. Absolutely. So just what Heidi says. Heidi, absolutely. Love your cat. Shelly says, M. Taylor. Deborah. Oh, I love this cat. So lovely, Paula. Here's Josh's, I think this is Vermeer. Your version of Vermeer as, like, I don't know, some kind of Bauhaus style painting. It looks like Lego too, potentially. And then we got a whole bunch here because Josh is just cranking paintings out. There's Van Gogh. I think this is Van Gogh's self-portrait where he's running around with his easel, and some Roy Lichtenstein paintings. A pop artist. I think this is a Monet that you painted in Roy Lichtenstein, or Monet, or yeah, Roy Lichtenstein in Monet colors. Really mashing things up. You've got some landscapes you've been exploring, and this is a really nice version of Edvard Munch's The Scream. It's almost, I wonder how you did that one. It looks like you painted, it looks a lot like a lithograph or a print. So it looks like you potentially applied these colors and then painted or used a pen to paint these lines back over top of it, which it has a very like woodcut like quality. I like that a lot. Very cool. Way to go, Josh. And then I think you were talking about how you took the drawing course on tracing with the grid to transfer images, and then you use this. This is what Jacques-Louis David, yeah, the Wraith of the Horatii, famous Jacques-Louis David painting. These Roman soldiers taking an oath. I like the, you know, it's kind of, again, there's with a lot of your paintings, Josh, like a real boldness in the way that you express yourself. Like here, this has got to be one of your best for sure. I think you probably spent a little bit more time on it than some of the other ones. This is Leonardo da Vinci, Lady with Ermine. I think this is at the National Gallery in London, and I love the original painting. This is a gorgeous painting. But you really did a great job, even with because these hands in this particular painting are like one of the most famous aspects of this original painting. And you really, oops, I think my mouse just ran out of batteries potentially. I don't know. I didn't get a warning, so I'll have to do this with just my keyboard. So I've got this cursor right in the middle. Anyway, I'm gonna plug this in. See if I get any juice in here before we cut short. Well, I think we'll end here in about 5 minutes. So, here's another landscape. We did a sunset on gesso board, which is another material. Gesso board is like a panel that's made purely of gesso. I think there is some sort of structure inside, because gesso itself can be a little fragile, but they're kind of a newer material that is like super smooth, but just like a super smooth gessoed surface that you can get at art supply stores. You're probably getting them on Amazon too, or wherever, but a little bit more of a specialized art material. But you can see that there's like no texture there, like no weave of the canvas. So some people may really like to explore that kind of thing. Some more studies, landscapes. These are gorgeous. Oh, now here, this is Irene's paintings here. Well, I love this one. When I saw this appear on the Facebook, I was really excited. I like that you're really exploring the warm and cool colors in this painting, Irene. So we have like the warm colors on the water there and the sunset, and then in the background we have the cool colors around the sun and in the sky to help give us really nice sense of depth here. The only thing I would say to help improve this is just having a little bit more of a softer transition from the hot to the cool. So, and I can't use my cursor to point it out, but right kind of on the horizon level, I would have some of that cool, like the magenta, the cool red, and then that cool yellow. I would have them kind of, you would blend a little bit of that on top of the warm colors below. Or do the opposite, have a little bit of the warm colors. Well, no, it might be a little bit too. So I would probably put the cool. Probably what I would have done is put cool colors down first, and then blend some warmer colors over top of it, and get further warmer as we go to that horizon. Just so, because right now it's a bit of an abrupt, like, and I think you just want to have a little bit softer of a transition. Yeah, that's what I would say. But ultimately, really, really nice. The water looks very placid. So those little kind of little white caps there, I think I would continue them a little bit further, even into where the water is, and where the water is maybe putting yellow so where the reflection of the sun is coming down into where the orange and the red, I would have those white caps coming in and then add a little bit of orange and red on the white cap, so we can see that those lines, kind of like when we were looking at the Sherry Boyle painting, the big wave coming, having a bit of that same sort of transition. And great attempt at this painting. Like, this is, sunsets are again, we should do a sunset painting. I've been wanting to do a Turner painting, and he did some great sunsets. And I think Josh has asked about Turner a few times. So he's somebody that really explored the sunset, like Claude Monet as well. This one, I think Heidi posted just today. It blew me away. This is, Heidi was documenting her family trip to Italy and made this version of the painting, and I think she said she was not very happy with it. I, however, was pretty excited upon seeing it. I think this is a great, great job, Heidi. And I think you sketched this, you eyeballed the whole thing out, drew it all out, didn't trace anything, which makes it even more remarkable of an achievement. I love the way that you painted everything in here. I mean, what could I say? The only things that I would potentially say to improve it, not that I think there's much, is I think it could use with a little bit of darker contrast. Like, I could see you glazing a little bit of shadows kind of underneath the roofs, where they hang over top of the wall, right? Like, so this part of the wall, I could see you just taking a little bit of a darker glaze, like potentially like a little bit of purple or blue, and just doing a little bit of that, and that would help give some volume. Like, we would sense the weight of the roof hanging over. Same thing like underneath the shutters and the windows, like potentially in the corner, like behind where she's standing, and you've got a little bit of a shadow for her. But I guess when I look at this, I see in the sky, it's a clear sky, so there's no clouds, right? On a cloudy day, we don't have any shadows, right? Because the light is bouncing around through the clouds and it's diffused, so we have a situation where the only shadows we would see are like right by people's feet, kind of like where she is right now. There's very little shadow, but you've painted the sky blue, which so there's a, and I know this is super like nerdy to nerd out on, but it's one of those things that maybe you don't know. Well, you said you weren't quite happy with it. So I think what I would say is, it looks like potentially the original photograph was taken on a cloudy day, and so you probably didn't see a lot of shadows in the building, and or on the ground where this person is standing, and so you painted it that way. But then you said, oh, but I would really like for to make it a really bright, like a sunny day, because it was cloudy that day. So I'm gonna improve when I make the painting, I'm gonna make it a bright sunny day, which is great. That's one of the great things we can do when we're painting, is we can change the time of day, the weather. You can make you could take a photograph of something in the middle of winter and just convert it into a summer painting just by not painting the snow and changing the light and all that kind of stuff. But the thing is when you do that, is you also have to kind of think about, okay, well, if I've removed the clouds and turned it into a sunny day, then what happens on a sunny day is we get also some pretty bright light and some pretty harsh shadows. So that would, and just because right now it's not clear to me where the sun is and what direction it's coming from. Like, it looks potentially like it's coming from from the top right, like kind of on the far, like if you're thinking this is my painting, it looks like it's coming from like right here, but kind of a little bit in behind her. So that would make me think that the bottom right of the painting, down here, we might see like a shadow coming from, how do I do this with my hands? Kind of like the let me see if this mouse has got any extra juice in it here. Okay, so it makes me think that there might be a shadow coming right around here. This little triangular area, we would see a bit of a shadow. And then also maybe this face of the building would be a little bit darker because the sun is maybe coming in from behind here. And I'm just making that decision based on this little bit of a shadow coming from her body here, suggesting that the light is coming from over her other shoulder, right? Anyway, just little tiny details, but just those are the things that even you might, that sound really geeky when I talk about it, but it's one of those things that even people who don't know really anything about painting, they look at it and they're like, looks great, but I just also don't know why it's not a masterpiece. How do I turn it into a masterpiece? And that's by kind of thinking about all of these details together and what, you know, anyway. Here's this is I think a pastel that Gemini Nails did. Pretty darn good for pastel. That's great. What can I say? I don't know. Looks great. I would be really interested to see if you could do this with acrylic, and see how what you would do differently than with pastels and with acrylic, because it is fun to kind of explore different materials and do the same painting in different materials. That's one of my assignments that I give my students to do at the university, is the same painting done in a bunch of different materials. And then so we get, because that makes students realize that different materials are useful for to communicate different things, that the material helps convey different ideas. As Marshall McLuhan would say, the medium is the message, right? And not to get into what he's actually talking about, but if we think about that in terms of like a art context, you know, painting using making a drawing on a computer versus making a painting with acrylic on a canvas that's this big, versus an oil painting on a postcard, versus a pencil on paper or graphite. All these different materials, they all have different strengths, and they also carry different kind of meanings and ideas that even when people don't have any art background whatsoever, they interpret them differently, just based on this, like, they're absorbing all this information unconsciously. And so trying the same image in a bunch of different materials, you realize, like, oh, this image works really well with soft pastels, but when I try painting it in acrylic, it doesn't convey that same oomph to it. But if I paint it in gouache, whoa, and then you're like, man, I gotta be painting in gouache this whole time. I've been fiddling around with acrylics and soft pastels, but gouache is my jam, right? So that's, by using these different materials, you start to kind of realize what helps you get closer to your ultimate expression. Here's Gail's version of, she painted a couple paintings for her grandkids. Here's one of, this is a Fortnite image for her 10-year-old. That's great. And then here's some scary dragons for a 6-year-old. Wow. Very cool. Aww. What does that say? Granny? Grandy? Oh, I like how you signed it with like your maybe the way that your grandchildren call you. That's cool. They must be so pumped to have paintings by their grandmother about things that they are into, right? Rather than like some stuffy old painting, they're like, oh, thanks, Grandma. They're like, whoa, you did a Fortnite painting for me? That's so cool. My grandma's so cool. I think that's so cool. Let me see. See, Gail says, are you saying gouache? Oh, I mean gouache. Here, I'll just type it in the... I think that's how you spell gouache. Let me just, since it just came up, I'll just take a quick, because I mentioned it a few times. No. How do you spell gouache? Oh, there's how you spell gouache. I'll put it in the chat. So gouache is an opaque watercolor, right? A type of water media. So a lot of illustrators use gouache. Gouache is like the favorite material. Before, a lot of illustrators now use iPads and Cintiq tablets to draw on, but previous to that, you know, if you've ever seen Mad Men, and you've seen those, you know, the TV show Mad Men, and you see the paintings that they make for the advertisements that some of the characters are artists that work there, almost all of those paintings are made with gouache, or at least they were originally. I don't know what they made the reproductions of for the TV show, but you know, gouache is like this, is a really nice, again, it's like watercolor, but it's an opaque watercolor. So you get these really nice, super saturated colors. So it looks like there's a couple, there's obviously other people who have got Skillshare classes on how to use gouache. Feel free to check them out. And you probably wouldn't want to learn gouache from me, because I've only used it a couple times, so I don't really know how to, I wouldn't know the first thing about how to teach people how to use it. I see. Oh, there's one of my old students from Emily Carr, Shamsa. Hey, Shamsa, nice to see you again. You say, I love Mad Men. Hope you're doing well. Yes, hope you're doing well as well. I hope you're enjoying your summer, unless you're doing summer classes. Which is not a bad idea. Summer at Emily Carr is nice and quiet, and you can get a lot of work done during that time. And I know you've done another painting, Gail. I want to get to, I think maybe we'll end on it because I'm super pumped about it. So I just want to show you, oh, here's another, this is Anna, another new student here. She's doing the drawing class, and so some of the drawings she's done in the drawing class. I wanted to show that real quick. Here's, speaking of water media, here's Dolores did of this bear, a polar bear maybe, or it's a brown bear, based on a painting by David McEwen. I'm not familiar with him, but this is really nice. I remember we've talked about a few people using outlines and not outlines, dark lines, not, right? Watercolor is one of those mediums where we see a lot of outlining, either with like pencil or marker and then painting inside. And so you can have like a very subtle use of color, and then you outline it with these kind of dark lines, and it really... Dolores did upload a version of this, and we looked at it in our last feedback episode, and I gave her a couple of little pointers about adding some shadows underneath the arm, and I think on the face a little bit. Oh, and I think on the rock, the curling rock on the ground down here and underneath the brush. And she took my advice and actually did a little bit of tinkering to this painting, and wow, it is like, I mean, it was a great painting before, but now this is like an exceptional artwork. Like really, really cool. Like, and that's what's super exciting. Like sometimes, and I totally get it, like when you're first starting out and you're painting all by yourself in your room, and you have really no idea whether you're doing good or bad. You kind of have a feeling you're probably not doing great because it's not as great as these masters that we've been doing. but you're probably doing much better than you think you're doing. And then sometimes it's just like getting a little bit of feedback from a teacher or another. I mean, that's why people take classes, right? Is so that they can get an extra little bit of feedback. That's why I always encourage people to send me your worst paintings rather than your best paintings. I give you a kudos, pat on the back, and you're great. But I think most of us want to get better and better and better. So sharing some things you're struggling with, that's where I can really help you, right? Because you can see some of you guys sent me all your best stuff, and it's like, looks great. I don't know what to say, but amazing. But anyway, so Dolores really took that advice, and like, this is beautiful. Like, this is now something, like, honestly, you could probably send this to, like, Curling Canada, and they probably put it in, like, their annual report, or I don't know how they could use it, but I'm sure they'd be blown away. Or this, you put it on social media, and if this the curler has a social media account, tag her on it. I'm sure she'd be just like super excited. Curlers, they don't get the same attention that hockey players and football players get, right? So there's probably not a lot of people making paintings of curlers out there, right? So you might be one of the first, and you know, she might be super excited. She might buy it off of you. She might commission you to do the whole team and the whatever, right? So, I mean, stranger things have happened, right? But this is really, I'm really, really proud of you. This is really great, Dolores. And also, just as a teacher, people don't always listen to what I have to say. So when people do, I get really excited. Okay, I think we got two more things we're going to look at here, and then we'll sign off for the night. So, I just see here, Shanta says, I couldn't find the classes I was interested in for the summer, so hopefully I'll see you soon in the fall. Yeah, maybe that would be great. I don't know what classes I'm teaching in the fall, but hopefully we'll be in person in the fall, and we can see each other in the hallway for the first time in a long time. Joshua says, I hear your feedback on the girl with the pearl earring. Unfortunately, I can't change it because I dry it and layer it with Mod Podge. Ah, okay. I hope you only want to put the Mod Podge on the acrylic paintings. Don't put Mod Podge on your oil paintings, Josh, because it's not going to stick, and it's just going to peel and make a big mess, right? Because acrylic, you can put oil paint on acrylic, but you can't put acrylic on top of oil paint. Although Mod Podge is acrylic, but it's also kind of a glue. But I still wouldn't put it on oil. But anyway, but if you did paint it with all acrylic paint, you could put paint acrylic on top of Mod Podge. There's no reason why you couldn't do that. Because they're both acrylic, so that would still work. Anyway, so here Deborah's version. This is a couple of polar bears underneath a tree. I think this is beautiful. Really beautiful. I mean, I love the bears themselves are gorgeous. Don't get me wrong. I love the bears. Beautiful. A lot of subtle uses of these white tints and gray tones in here. Like, because I see there's a little bit of green in here, purples and blues and pinks, purples down here, blue, like very, very subtle changes of color. It just like, and I bet you when you're mixing that, you're like, I don't even know, these are all starting to look the same, but certainly pulled it off big time here. So this is gorgeous, but I think the best part of the painting is the tree here, and these pine needles. Like, I mean, sure, I know this would have taken you like an hour or more to paint all these tiny little brush strokes, but boy, oh boy, did it really paid off, because it just, like, I think without that tree in the background, this painting would just look a lot more simple, and honestly a little bit more forgettable. Like, but this background, you've given it so much love and attention that it helps frame the bear and her cub, and it's like it's almost like it gives it another embrace, right? The mother bear is embracing her little cub, and then we've got like the tree or nature also giving it like this gentle embrace. And there's some just conceptually ideas behind it are kind of beautiful, and formally it is also very beautiful. Gorgeous, absolutely fantastic. I love that. This is a lot of work, but it really paid off. I don't know if I would have the same attention to put all that work in there, so I really applaud you for that. Really gorgeous. My goodness, you guys. Okay. And Gemini says, challenge accepted to do the Montague Dawson ships in acrylic. Interesting. I can't wait to see it. That would be great to see them side by side, too. And it'd be really just also interesting to see how you deal with some of these things, like with oil or chalk pastel, soft pastels. Doing some of this kind of the soft transitions in pastels are really easy, right? You can kind of blend it and take your finger and smooth it out, and it transitions really nice and easy. Trying to do that with acrylics, however, that's like, I mean, I don't want to give you any grief because it causes you some frustration, but that's a bit of a challenge. So I'm glad that you're accepting that. It's really cool. Joshua says, but I hear you, and I will use it in the next time I make a portrait. Thank you, Josh. You don't have to listen to anything I have to say. I'm just one funny-looking guy on the internet, right? And so, yeah, I like, as I said, for anybody, take whatever I have to say with a grain of salt. I'm sure you could show this to somebody else, and they might have a very different opinion, and would just be like, whoever told you to do that, don't listen to him. He has no idea what he's talking about. Anyway, so I just want to end, I think, here. I think I've gone through a lot of stuff, and we've been on for 3.5 hours. I'm sure people want to go. So I just want to show this because this is, Gail took I think this is her own photograph of this mushroom growing in these wet leaves that are rotting, you know, maybe in her front yard or in a local park. And, you know, this photo it's interesting, but it's probably the kind of thing that most of us walk by every day without thinking, and if anything, go like, man, somebody should rake up all of these ugly leaves. This is gross, right? Because here in Canada, or at least here in Vancouver, like, my whole neighborhood looks like this. Because all this kind of stuff has, you know, the winter has kind of come to an end, and everything's kind of mushy, and where people are just getting out into the garden to clean up and plant stuff. But it's not an overly memorable particular kind of scene. But what she's done with it is just fantastic. Like, I'm so impressed, Gail, that this is what you created out of this. This, my God, I could not be more pleased with the way that you painted these leaves. I mean, I love this, I don't know, what is this kind of mossy thing, or whatever that is up there, but you've even decided to include a little bit more of it. All these different, these different colors, all these fall colors, they're just so cool. Like, I'm trying to remember who this, it kind of reminds me of Alex Katz. If you recall, we did the Alex Katz, the swimmer, the portrait of this woman with a swim cap, and it was mostly green. He did a lot of like landscapes. This is probably almost like too complex for his particular style. He'd be more flat, but the way that you've applied the paint, like, this is so nice that I really would strongly encourage you to think about doing a series of paintings like this, and do maybe just 5 more of them. You take more pictures, or scour the internet, find more pictures of just, like, you know, leaves, maybe leaves from your, like, wherever you happen to be located, like, I don't know if you're in Toronto or Vancouver or Miami or Hong Kong or wherever you happen to be, but just maybe like look up, like, you know, wet leaves on the ground, Beijing or whatever, right? And then take some photos, or maybe you've got a bunch of them on your phone, and try just like doing 5 different versions of this. And before you know it, you've got like a portfolio of artwork that is yours, that is like based on an interest of your own, and like you've really elevated this, like, you know, not only is this kind of a banal image of, but it's almost kind of ugly. And I'm sure you're probably like, what? I think this is gorgeous. I love mushrooms. I'm a big mushroom picker, and my husband and I, we go hiking all the time. It's like, I don't know anything about wild mushrooms and picking mushrooms. I don't know if something's poisonous or delicious, if something is like like $1 million truffle or the most poisonous mushroom on earth. I would have no idea. I would never pick anything off the ground because I'd be afraid it would kill me. But this would not be something that I would look at and think like, oh, I'm going to make a good painting out of it. But you've done just that. Like, I think you should be really, really proud of yourself, and it should be really inspiring to everyone else to think like, huh, like, I don't, because the number one thing I hear from people all the time is like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to paint. I don't know, like, so sometimes, and people go like, and there's a great excuse to procrastinate because, well, I don't know what to paint, so I'm just not going to paint. Whereas you can just go out, take a photograph of something out your front door. Maybe it's the shoes that you wore to work, right? Van Gogh did a few dozen paintings of his shoes and other people's shoes, right? There's lots of people who've painted like the food left on the table after dinner, right? There's a whole tradition of Dutch artists who painted like feasts and like the dinner before, like, or after a big banquet was served, right? Like, there's lots of people who redid those Morandi painting. Remember the flower and the little cups? That was like back in November or wherever, right? Like, and he spent his whole life painting the same like 20 different cups and different little arrangements, and yet they're like, he is first seen as like the artist, like a guy that just was like so dedicated to painting the same things over and over and getting so good at it. Those paintings sell for millions and millions of dollars each these days. But just as I'm wrapping up here, I would say that it might be nice to see a little bit of a shadow. Like, you've got, it looks like a few shadows being cast on some leaves. I could see a little tiny shadow on some of these leaves underneath, just to help kind of make this mushroom pop, because it does sort of look a little flat on there, but it's not a big deal. And if you don't want to change it, I wouldn't change it. But it's just, I don't know. I could see, like, tell me, can you not see this as like the cover to the New Yorker or something? Can you not see like the text New Yorker right on the top here, and then like, I don't know, 50 things to do in New York this fall or something? I don't know, whatever. But yeah, this is really beautiful. More on towards the illustration side of things, which again is not a bad thing at all. Okay, Deborah says, thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate your critique. The bears painting was done with everything that you taught me. We owe you so much. I appreciate that. And Shamsa says, I love this. The colors and the way you painted the leaves look so beautiful. And Gail says, thank you so much. Okay, everyone. Well, we've been together here for 3.5 hours. I'm sure some of you are, probably not everyone's still with me. So we will continue this. Obviously, there's still a dozen more episodes that we haven't got a chance to cover yet. So we'll do that in a few more weeks, and it'll give people the time to catch up. Like, where did we end off at? We got all the way to Tolkien Reading Day. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 12 more paintings that we haven't covered But as, quite frankly, I'm looking at them, there's a few of them, like the sea turtles, that's a bunch. Tolkien, or we talked about Tolkien, right? Amrita Shargil, we've got 13 people did that. A.Y. Jackson got a bunch. Robert Bateman. There's a few other ones like the Soba Singh and the Trilok Singh. Even the Batman, the Star Wars, and the Whistler, which were just like last week, so it's not surprising that they haven't got as much. Even the polar bears, there's only 4 polar bear paintings. So there's a lot of people who wanted polar bears. There's only 4 people who painted them. So I'd love to see a few more of those paintings there that we can chat about maybe in a few more weeks from now. Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining me, and I hope the rest of your evening goes as spectacularly as your afternoon has been. I can't congratulate you enough for your achievements. It's so exciting to see people like blossoming in front of our very eyes, and you should feel like a tremendous amount of satisfaction from being able to make paintings like this. Remember, the vast majority of people are too afraid to do what you have done. Even if you're not super happy with it, you are doing way, way more and way better than the vast majority of people are. So I'm really, really like super proud of you guys for having the courage to not only follow along and paint with me, but to share them with the Facebook group and with the world here, right? Like, that takes a huge amount of courage to do that, and and there's plenty of other people who are watching but aren't sharing their images because they're afraid that what they're doing isn't, you know, as good or enough to be shown, right? So you guys sharing your work gives other people confidence that they can also, you know, achieve something that they may have thought was beyond their possibilities. So that, you know, like, I couldn't do this without you guys and your support. All right, you are helping show other people that it is possible to achieve something. Again, whether it's painting or violin or tennis or whatever that they've been wanting to do but haven't done in a long time. So, congratulations to you guys. Thank you so much for participating. Before we go, please just like and subscribe to the channel. If you want to leave a donation, there's the PayPal link below. If you want to e-transfer or anything, you can get in touch with me through the Facebook group. So we will see you guys in a couple of days. We began our whole series on Asian art. We're going to explore well, not all, but a small number of some of the greatest artists on the other side of the planet that really, to be quite frank, especially a few of them who are virtually gods in China and Japan, but people here in Canada, North America, I'm sure even some of my colleagues, some of the teachers I teach with would not know who they are. So we're going to finally give some of them some due and help expose them to a whole new audience. So I'm super excited about that. So we'll see you guys on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're going to spend all of the rest of May featuring these great artists from Asia, since it is Asian History Month here in Canada, at least, right? So we will see you guys in a few more days, and take some time off and celebrate your achievements. Pour yourself a glass of wine, kick your feet up, maybe watch Tim's Vermeer tonight. Okay, everyone? We'll see you in a few days. Have a good night, everybody.